12 o'clock on your Tuesday afternoon now. Welcome in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Terry Ford along with you as we slowly kind of get back into the swing of things here for a game week as Coach Beamer's presser coming up right at an hour from now at 1 o'clock as we'll hear what he has to say previewing this matchup against Ole Miss. Also give us the latest health reports on Lenora Sellers, Rocket Sanders, Jared Brown. For what he can tell us, I'm not expecting, the most thorough dynamic. If anything, you want to play your cards close to the vest. Try and keep Ole Miss on their toes for what exactly you have rolling out this weekend. But the hope is obviously that South Carolina will be good to go across all fronts when it comes to health their players and can bring their very best to the field this weekend against Ole Miss because you're going to need that. Ole Miss took a tough loss this past weekend against Kentucky, but there's no denying how talented this team is and what this team is capable of. There's a reason many people, pick them in the offseason to be in the college football playoff because they're that good or supposed to be that good. In fact, I was just looking through the roster there in the last hour, putting some notes together for, previewing the game. And I knew they had a lot of transfers, but man, I did not realize how many transfers are on this roster, just top to bottom. I'm not even talking about starters. Like Lane Kiffin has hit the portal hard. Obviously, the collective out there, I believe it's the Grove Collective, has done a really good job of collecting the necessary funds to make sure they have a lot of high caliber talent that is going to be rolling here this weekend. And for Kentucky, the position they're in is one that's kind of, a crossroads, so to speak, where they manhandled everyone through the first 4 weeks of the season, got beat by Kentucky, and as we know, or we think we know, in what is now an expanded playoff, you can lose multiple games, two or three games, depending on where you're at in the conference and all that kind of stuff, and still be okay. So losing one game to Kentucky is not the end of the world. But the perception of this team is hanging in the balance a bit, if that's the best way to describe it. Because, again, we know the talent they have. We know the guys they had returning from last year's team that was the best team in school history. And if you lose to Kentucky, okay, that's, you didn't play your best against a team that maybe you're overlooking. All right, one bad Saturday, whatever. But if you come in and lose South Carolina too, and not saying South Carolina's a bad team because they're a very solid team, as we've seen so far, I think the perception is more about, well, Ole Miss just isn't as good as we thought they were, as opposed to, wow, look at how good South Carolina's doing. I'm not saying that's the right way to look at it, but that's how I feel like most people will assess it, is like, well, Ole Miss just isn't as good as they once as we thought they were, and South Carolina took advantage of that. Regardless of what the narrative is going to be, this is a big game for South Carolina that is within the realm of possibility to win. Something we didn't think was going to be possible, or didn't think was going to be as likely in the offseason, given what Ole Miss had coming back, given what they got in the transfer portal, the whole 9 yards. We thought this was going to legitimately be one of the toughest games of the entire season, maybe the toughest game, and it might still be that. But you feel a little better having seen Kentucky handle their business against Ole Miss. That being said, Ole Miss was still in position trying to tie the game at the last second end of regulation. They could have sent it in overtime, and who knows what happens then, to where we'd be having a different conversation if Ole Miss ends up winning that game in overtime. But they lost, and now everybody's looking like, hey, what's wrong with Ole Miss? Why did they lose to Kentucky? So once again, you're going to have a lot of people tuning into this game, not necessarily for South Carolina purposes, but to see if Ole Miss is going to rebound and prove to everyone, oh, okay, there's that team we were looking for. They just had a bad week and lost to Kentucky. Or if South Carolina beats them, well, guess Ole Miss just isn't as good as we thought they were.
Well, the funny part about it, if you look, and that game's on right now, Ole Miss outgained Kentucky easily. I do believe.
Got more sacks on Vandegrift than they got on Dart.
More sacks. I mean, it wasn't like Kentucky. I mean, look, I thought Kentucky went there and out-physicaled them and kind of punched them repeatedly. And Ole Miss was kind of like, oh, wait a minute here. This isn't Wake Forest. Styles make fights, right?
Right.
Kentucky's style is so different from Ole Miss's style. And Ole Miss hadn't been into a rock fight. And that was kind of, that really, if you look at the final score of that game, when you look at Ole Miss's typical way they want to go, that was a rock fight for Ole Miss.
Yep.
And they just didn't handle it. Now, how are they going to bounce back? So they got knocked down. Are they going to stay down or are they going to bounce back? That's going to be the interesting question that's going to get answered on Saturday. But it wasn't like, even though Ole Miss was out-physicaled, which they were, they still outgained Kentucky. And so it's not like, they totally bogged down, right?
Right.
So this idea that Ole Miss is kind of like a paper tiger, so to speak, I'm not ready for that yet. A paper bulldog. I'm not ready for that. Let's just see, because there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball at Ole Miss. But is their MO going to be good like last year? The 2 games Ole Miss lost last year against physical teams who punched them, right? The MO of Lane Kiffin's teams in Oxford are their finesse. They love to, they love the shiny stuff, score points, gain yards. Their defenses haven't been very good, and you can punch them in the face.
Right.
Well, they got punched in the face again last Saturday, and they didn't respond very well. They lost. The difference is Kentucky is not of the caliber of the people who punched them in the face last year. Remember, they got blown out last year when they got punched in the face. So it's not just the MO this year. It's kind of like the thought of Lane Kiffin's teams at Ole Miss are very finesse, not physical. They don't want to get into a brawl with you.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. They want to be pretty. They want a lot of yards, a lot of points. They want that type of game. If you can dirty it up with Ole Miss, that's typically how you feel like you beat these Lane Kiffin teams. And so we saw last week, a lot of people went like this. Same Ole Miss. Same Ole Miss. Yeah, they got more talent. Same Ole Miss. So we'll see moving forward. Because, again, there's another part of this, too. You've got to apply this idea, right?
Right.
It's not as simple as, we're going to play just like Kentucky. You got to apply. You got to be physical, obviously. You got to beat them up. You got to make it kind of like a dirty game, dirty game. I don't mean dirty like kicking each other in the lower extremity. I mean like dirtying the game up, making it, again, a rock fight. And that's what Ole Miss doesn't want. So South Carolina can rock fight this baby up. You see where Ole Miss can end up in the loss column. And then you sit back and say, well, God, South Carolina boat race Kentucky at Kentucky. How good can Ole Miss be? Sometimes that doesn't work. Just saying. I really believe, and we talked about this yesterday, I really believe that college football, except for the upper level, is truly a week-to-week thing like the NFL because of the transfer portal. I mean, you saw what Kentucky was when South Carolina whooped them. But after that, Kentucky played Georgia to a one-point game at home and then went and beat Ole Miss in Oxford. So, again, how much of that can you make of anything? You know what I think it is? It's a week-to-week game.
I think it was Jamie Bradford that Bill and Preston were talking to yesterday on the early game, and he brought up something interesting that is kind of in line with what you're talking about with this era of the transfer portal and so much player movement and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it takes about half a season to truly figure out what a team is. And I know we're kind of looking at this through the block of the first month because everybody's played 4 games for the most part. Some teams have played 5 games, and I feel like that's pretty good sample size. Maybe it does take to the middle of October. Maybe it does take getting past the halfway point of the season to really say, okay, now we actually know what this team is. And that's why I said it was so interesting where Ole Miss is positioned coming into this game, because if they lose to Kentucky, they beat South Carolina, then everybody's just saying, okay, well, they just had a bad Saturday. A couple things went wrong, lost to Kentucky. They're still back on track. But it was South Carolina. Well, this team isn't as good as we thought they were. And
Right.
there's no way you're beating Georgia. There's no way you're beating some of these other teams later on in your schedule. And congratulations, Lane, you're going 8-4.
Yeah, and especially this year with so many expectations like heaved upon that team. That's another part too. You've never had these kind of expectations at Ole Miss, even when Hugh Freeze had the 10-win season, right? I don't remember the expectations being as high because now you have a 12-team playoff, so there's a door open for Ole Miss to actually contend for something big.
That was the thing going back to the Ole Miss day or Hugh Freeze days. Even in the 2 years they beat Alabama, they still never won the SEC championship game.
No.
Because it's like, well, yeah, we beat Alabama, but we still haven't been able to handle our business against the other teams in our division well enough to get to Atlanta.
Right.
So the expectations were never placed loftily high, even for those teams.
Right, so, and now you have the expectation of Ole Miss this year with the idea there's a 12-team playoff. There's a big old door sitting there for you to walk on through. And can Ole Miss handle this kind of expectation? Can Lane? Lane hasn't had these kind of expectations. Lane has been the snarky dude coming through the side door, late to the party, with his hair all messed up, wearing his loafers with no socks. And he's that guy. He's never been the guy that everybody's expecting anything from. Now, guess what? We're expecting something. How does Lane Kiffin handle expectations? How does his team handle expectations? The program. Some guys aren't good at being the hunted. They're just not. They like being the hunter. They like sneaking in on you. They like, being like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible and dropping through the ceiling and stealing your stuff and then leaving. We'll find out. Can Lane? Because I think that's a fair conversation. We talked about it coming into the year. Could Ole Miss handle expectation? Well, you know what? They rolled through they ate all the cupcakes. Then they got to Kentucky, and they lost a game they had no business losing. Let's just be honest. You shouldn't lose that game. Not just that game in general, but Kentucky doesn't win those games. They don't win those games.
Yeah, especially getting them at home. Like that's a game that, again, nobody picked Kentucky for a reason. Because nobody thought they had a chance.
No, not at all. And so Kentucky went in there and physically punched you. You couldn't handle it, just like Lane Kiffin teams can't. And now you got a loss. And now you're coming into Williams-Brice with a team that should be undefeated, that's 3-1, that's really held its own against LSU and Kentucky. And guess what? You got a problem. Now Ole Miss is favored, but you got a problem on your hands. Where you shouldn't have. You should be undefeated going into Williams-Brice. And you screwed up because, again, the stereotype of a Lane Kiffin team popped up again last Saturday. We don't want to fight you. We don't want to get into a brawl with you. Now, how are you going to handle this week? Now look, the season's not over. You lost one. But if you lose at South Carolina, you got 2 SEC losses. And last time I checked, you got a lot of season left. And guess what you have now? No wiggle room.
Exactly.
So how will Ole Miss play with a not major sense of urgency, but a sense of urgency that you don't want to lose your wiggle room 6 games into the season?
In addition to playing in what's going to be pretty hostile environment on Saturday.
Oh, absolutely a hostile
quite a few
environment.
Reasons.
Yes. So we'll see. But make no mistake, Ole Miss is talented.
Oh, one of the most talented teams. I mentioned this earlier. I knew they had a lot of transfers, but going back and looking at their roster, there's everywhere is a transfer.
Yeah. Now, the good news is the offensive line gave up some pressures against Kentucky and some sacks. That's a good thing. And again, in a physical game, Ole Miss came up small, is what they tend to do in the Lane Kiffin era. So we shall see. Obviously, our stuff starts at 10:30 on Saturday. Gamecocks Game Day, sponsored by LexMed Ortho. Network pregame at 12:30, kickoff 3:30. You can hear it all right here on 107.5 The Game in Columbia. You can hear the network pregame and the game on our sister station 100.3 in Myrtle Beach. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head, continuing our conversation about what's coming up on Saturday. And Shane Beamer with his presser, getting back to it today at 1. You'll hear that right here on The Game in Columbia. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head on The Game. Halftime show with Terry Ford and Tyler Head here on The Game. Happy to be hanging out with us. 1 o'clock, Shane Beamer, his weekly presser is coming up. Back to it after a bye week. And then Shane and Todd Ellis Thursday, 6 p.m. here in Columbia and our sister station in Myrtle Beach, 100.3 The Game. You'll hear Carolina calls with Todd and Shane. So a lot coming up, getting you ready for South Carolina and Ole Miss on Saturday. All right, speaking of that game, Lane Kiffin talking to the media yesterday, and Lane was asked, again, no one expect you to lose that game to Kentucky. What was your team's reaction when they took that L at home last Saturday?
I think they were really disappointed. I think they were really upset, really hurt. And I told them today that's a good thing, for guys that in the room that didn't and just went on with their day and, it didn't really hurt. That'll show you. The more you're invested, the more you put in something, you're going to feel different afterwards than somebody that isn't invested and doesn't put all their heart into it. So I think it was a good thing that they struggled so much the last 2 days.
Yeah, you want people to give a crap. You want people to hurt after a loss in anything. Forget sports, like something happens in your life, whatever. If you care, you're bummed, right? I mean, sure. If those guys walked off the field going, hey, man, where's the kegger? It's not what you want. You want them to go, wow, I'm not very happy. We lost that. We lost the game we shouldn't have lost. I'm now officially bummed, and let's figure it out from there. You want people who care.
Yeah, no, and you definitely, and Lane Kiffin's not going to admit to this, but I think there was a sense of they may have just overlooked Kentucky. This is a team that was hyped up the entire offseason. Many people, including myself, said they were a playoff team and had them penciled into their bracket before the season started. And they went out there and mauled the first 4 opponents they faced, even though that they were cupcakes, but feeling good about themselves. And Kentucky's coming in here. Carolina beat them by 25 points. Yeah, they played Georgia close, but that was a home game. They're coming into the Grove. Our noon game on a Saturday. We got this. And you know what? They got punched in the mouth, like you said, for 3 hours and lost. I think they're looking themselves in the mirror and not quite as cocky this week.
Well, plus they did this. It's Kentucky. Kentucky never wins these games. Come on. It's Kentucky. They didn't take Kentucky seriously. Absolutely not. It was totally set up for that kind of day Saturday. Now, again, I thought Ole Miss would beat Kentucky. If Kentucky covered, would I be shocked? No, because remember, Kentucky plays really slow. They kind of bore you to death. I could see it being where Kentucky doesn't lose as bad as people thought. But I did not think the Wildcats would go into the Grove and beat Ole Miss. I didn't think it would happen.
Nobody did.
Because, again, we've watched Kentucky, and you hit it on the head. Yeah, you know what? You hung with Georgia, but that game was at Kroger. And the week before that, the game before that, South Carolina came in and boat raced you in front of your home fans. So are you going to be able to go and take out an Ole Miss team, like you said, looks like a college football playoff squad if you just check the collection of talent on that roster? No way Kentucky should do that. Well, they did. It just goes back to some of the stereotypes of Ole Miss under Lane. Not physical. They don't want to fight you. They want to score a lot of points and walk out with their uniform not very dirty. And the minute you start pushing them around, they roll up in the fetal position and whine. So we'll see how Ole Miss bounces back this week. But the formula is there. The formula is kind of always the formula with Lane Kiffin teams at Ole Miss is you beat them up. Get out there and you beat them up. Throw them around a little bit. Get physical with them. That's what Kentucky did. And South Carolina has the defense to do that. If you look at defensively, the Gamecocks can get a pass rush after you. Kentucky chased Jackson Dart all over the place. The Ole Miss offensive lineman, one offensive lineman had a grade of over 61. The Ole Miss offensive line struggled with the Kentucky pass rush, and whose pass rush is better than Kentucky's? South Carolina's.
Mm-hmm.
So the formula's there. The one thing that I guess in my mind, the weakness at times of the South Carolina defense is giving up yards in the run game. Ole Miss does like to run the ball. And if Ole Miss starts running the ball against the South Carolina defense and neutralizes what will be obviously a very good pass rush, that could be an issue on Saturday. Because Ole Miss will continue to run it if you don't stop them. And they have running backs. So we'll see. But, you want your players to hurt after a loss.
Of course.
And especially when you brought in a lot of players out of the transfer portal. And again, transfer portals year to year. Ask Eric Musselman when he was at Arkansas before he moved on to Southern Cal. For years in a row, Musselman brought the transfer portal guys in. It worked perfect, right?
Sure.
Didn't last year.
No.
Sometimes it just doesn't fit. The culture doesn't work.
I equate what Ole Miss did this offseason, and yes, they had one of the best years in program history, last year with winning 11 games, winning a big bowl game, and all that kind of stuff. But they are in winner bust mode this year with the talent that they brought in, with the expectations that they had. Not saying the years after this can't be successful, but if you can't win with this collection of talent that you have, I don't know what your ceiling ever is going to be going forward. Because,
let's be fair. Ole Miss last year was really good. They won double-digit games. Year before that, they were, 8-1, and then Lane was flirting with leaving.
Yeah, then they, lost the last 3 games.
And they cratered. Year before that, they won double-digit games. This has been a good program for 3 years.
Yeah.
This is not, out of nowhere. They've been good. Now it's just been taken to another notch. We'll see. All right, here's Lane Kiffin also discussing, and we'll snag, was it cut 3? No, let's go cut 1, Tyler. Containing the South Carolina pass rush, which is one of the best in the nation.
Very different players types than last week, polar opposite, and then very different schemes too. Kentucky ultrasound, keep the ball in front of you, really big bodies. Stoops built that defense that way, and then I think the addition of the Georgia linebacker was huge for them from a mentality and leadership standpoint. And you saw what they did to us, saw what they did to Georgia. These guys are built differently. They're more built on speed and twitch, so both present problems.
Yeah, it's a deal. It's a real deal, the South Carolina pass rush. And you had trouble with Kentucky last week. Kentucky's got guys up front. Deion Walker, there's a good chance you'll hear his name in the first round of the NFL draft.
Yep.
He's a dude. Oxendine is solid. Weaver coming off the edge can create problems. So Kentucky has guys who can get after your quarterback. They just don't get after your quarterback at the rate South Carolina gets after your quarterback. And right now, South Carolina's got 2 guys on the edge that are going to, if they continue on the way they are, play in the NFL.
Well, and as we saw a couple weeks ago, which was a big litmus test, they did it against one of the best offensive lines in the country. They did it against 2 tackles that are going to be playing on Sundays with their names getting called very early on in the next draft. And we said, coming away from that game, you can generate pressure on LSU. You can do it against anyone. And Ole Miss is that anyone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you watched what Kyle Kennard did to Will Campbell could have had his worst game ever at LSU, or his worst game in years at LSU. Couldn't handle Kyle Kennard. And Dylan Stewart has shown that, and he's a freshman, he's a teenager. Dylan Stewart, if he continues on this track, you could hear his name in the first round of the NFL draft. So, and then let's talk about the interior of the line. TJ Sanders he's going to get drafted. You look at Tonka Hemingway, and you look at Boogie Huntley and DeAndre Jules. These are guys that are all the guys up front on this football team that we just talked about are going to get an opportunity to play in the NFL. This is a legit, no-joke crew up front for South Carolina. So we'll see where it goes on Saturday. But Ole Miss is going to have their hands full. My one thing is if they can run the ball, they'll continue to run the ball until you stop them. That's my one on Saturday in that matchup. So it's funny. I just looked up, and the Ole Miss pass rush just ate Brock Vandagriff. And was it Princely or it was Ivy? Ivy coming off the edge. And the left tackle for Kentucky basically grabbed the back of his shoulder pads to try to stop him, and there's still a sack. Ole Miss can get after your quarterback, too. One pass rush is graded higher than South Carolina's, and it's Ole Miss. So, all right. There was goings on last night in the NFL. Let's get to that next. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head on the game.
Spears to take a direct snap. That's Pollard who comes in motion. Fake it to him, and the wrinkle works. And Tennessee first to reach the end zone tonight.
God, was that awful. Ugh. You know what, Tyler? Last night, basically, for me, was the slam dunk of we need 2 Monday night games.
I've been on that train for a while. Usually you get, because last week you had the fun game with the Bengals and the Commanders, and then you had that awful game with the Bills and the Jaguars, because it always seems to work out that way. One game's a dud, another game's are really fun and really exciting, like we had last night with Detroit and in Seattle as well. So yes, I'm very much team 2 games, because here's the thing: you can watch the first quarter or so of the first game, get you kind of feel if the game's going to be good or not, and if it sucks, all right, I got another game to watch. Yeah,
I mean, or you can do what a lot of people did last night. You got them on 2 different screens, right?
Right.
You like me, I had my main TV. I had the good game, and my little my side piece, my side hustle. I had that monstrosity of the Dolphins and the Titans on my smaller screen, and I would check that every now and then to see if the stands, anybody was still awake, and then I'd come back to the fun game, which was Seattle and Detroit. It was so much fun. Play us our fun highlight from the Detroit-Seattle game with the Lions.
Seattle's got to make a stop. Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to throw it back to Goff. Who had that on the bingo card? Touchdown Lions.
The Lions pulled a Philly special.
They did.
Last night.
Jared Goff had a fantastic night, and he didn't even get the game ball in the locker room afterwards.
How about Dan Campbell? Dan Campbell felt so bad. Dan Campbell's like, oh, my God, he was 18 of 18? I mean, I knew he had a really good night, but I feel terrible. I didn't give him a game ball. It was funny. It was funny. And, well, see, that's Jared Goff. When Jared Goff is on, he's got time to throw, and Jared Goff is in rhythm, he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Problem is, when he's not on rhythm, or when he's getting heat or he's getting pressure, Jared Goff, look, most quarterbacks aren't as good under pressure.
Sure.
But Jared Goff's really good when everything's working, and when he's under pressure, the difference is huge.
Yeah.
And you saw Goff last night. Not a ton of pressure, in rhythm, and Goff was, you could see all the talent of Jared Goff last night. And to his credit, he's gotten better in the havoc situations than he used to be. It's still the MO is getting Jared Goff's grill eventually is going to give you the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But he's gotten better playing against havoc, and I think they put him in a real. They built the offense around his skill set. They put him in positions more to succeed than fail. They've surrounded him with weapons like nobody's business. By the way, Jameson Williams is still running.
Yeah, and that was the knock on, or what was the biggest problem when he was in L.A. before Sean McVay got there, is he didn't have pieces around him. Right. McVay got there, got him to a certain point, still wasn't quite where you wanted him to, and of course, Stafford goes out there, they go on and win the Super Bowl, and he's kind of looked at as damaged goods. But yeah, the way Dan Campbell and this offense have been built around him, they got Gibbs and Montgomery. It's probably the best 1-2 punch in the NFL right now as far as running backs go. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown, you got Laporta, all those guys around him at the skill spots. Like, they just make him better. And all he's got to do is go out there, get the ball to your skill guys, let them do what they're going to do, and this offense can be successful and put up 42 points like they did last night.
Yeah, your point guard, basically, is what Jared Goff's doing. You got all these weapons. Just give him the ball. Don't try to do too much. You got a hell of an arm. Just go out there, run the offense. And look, hey, he's open. I'll get him the ball. Yeah. Hey, he's open. I'll get him the ball. Hey, let's run it a few times because our backs are pretty good. And the offensive line is solid, and it's just the offensive coordinator's really good, and Dan Campbell's very aggressive. It just works.
This might be the most well-rounded team in the NFL right now, or at least very close to it, because offensively, clicking on all cylinders. Defensively, Aiden Hutchinson leading the league in sack. Like, they've just got it everywhere as of right now.
Yeah, and they try what they do, and they brought this up today on ESPN, is they are very aggressive on offense, and part of it is to help protect their defense. And I thought that was very interesting how they said that, but it makes sense because you're trying to keep your defense out of having to win you games at this point. I mean, Hutchinson's a phenomenal pass rusher. They got some good. They went out to try to address the need of the back end of the defense in the secondary. I think their defense is better on paper than it was last year. Offensively, they're just ridiculous. I'll be honest with you. With the San Francisco going through the fact that everybody's getting hurt, you might look at Detroit being the team it could be a Super Bowl team. Just saying.
Which, tell somebody that 5 years ago.
I know we have our digital sales manager upstairs. Ted is from Michigan, and so is our sales manager, by the way, Leslie. And they're both geeking on the Lions, and they both look at you and go, "This is so weird." I mean,
like, we're supposed to be internally suffering every year. What's happening?
We're actually thinking this could be a really good team and go to a Super Bowl. Lions are really good, man. They really are. And that was Seattle's first loss last night. And they've been really good with Mike Macdonald as the head coach. We'll see where that goes. But I don't buy into Seattle as of yet. But I think the Lions are a legit Super Bowl contender.
Seattle was undefeated going to last night, playing not all that great teams.
No.
I think they gained a lot of respect from people last night for going toe-to-toe with a very good Detroit team.
In Detroit.
I
mean, and look, Seattle's got a lot of pieces on offense as well. It's how good is that defense going to be? McDonald did in Baltimore as the defensive coordinator was phenomenal. All the football dorks love McDonald because he's running a lot of different pressure packages, and he's got this going here and that going here, and he's disguising this and he's doing that, and all the film nerds love Mike Macdonald's defenses. So we'll see, because last night his defense got worked.
Yeah.
So we'll see moving forward. But, I mean, and also the thing with Seattle is Geno Smith. I mean, there's a ceiling on Geno Smith.
There is.
But I'll say this, again, to the credit of the coaching staff in Seattle. They're not asking Geno Smith to do things he can't do. And they've surrounded him with weapons. That receiving core is stupid. It just is. Kenneth Walker is a really nice running back. And Seattle's offensive line is solid as well for the most part. And they look at Geno Smith. Geno, just be you.
Yeah.
Don't try to be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, boss. Just be you.
It's funny. We don't get to see Seattle games a lot because they're not in the local market.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're usually playing the 4:00 game that you don't really get to see. But it's never ceases to amaze me every time I watch DK Metcalf. You forget how good he is. I know he had the fumble last night, and that obviously wasn't great. But like, dude's just a freak of nature.
Well, he's a physical specimen. It's just ridiculous. It's unfair. What kind of physical specimen DK Metcalf? If DK Metcalf, he's gotten better. If DK Metcalf could become a really good route runner to go with that physical freakishness, he would be unstoppable.
Yeah, he's just like, he's going to out-athlete you out there right now. And if he did refine his skills at wide receiver a little bit more, he could be truly unstoppable.
If he could be like Lockett is more of a technician as a wide receiver. If you take Lockett's technical ability to go with Metcalf's freakish physical ability, you have the greatest wide receiver maybe in the history of mankind.
Right.
And then, of course, they've got, Smith and Njigba also, who has grown as a slot receiver. They got weapons, man. They do, and they can run the ball. Those two teams are interesting. And then the other two are, The Titans will not be able to move forward until they realize Will Levis is not an NFL quarterback.
Well, it took him getting hurt last night for them to actually click their offense into gear with Mason Rudolph.
And what does that tell you? Mason Rudolph is running your offense better than Will Levis.
Yeah, it's not good.
And the flip side is, look, I'm a huge Mike McDaniel guy. I think, especially like his system of offense is great. He resurrected Tua, but everybody thinks it was all McDaniel resurrecting Tua. I don't know. I'm not a genius by any stretch. That offense looks different with Skylar Thompson and with Tyler Huntley than it does Tua.
He's not Kyle Shanahan where you can just plug in random quarterback number 3 and you go out there and be successful. It is definitely a tailor-made offense for Tua, and without Tua, they are struggling.
Firehouse Subtext, the hour coming up, 803-404-6100. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Thanks for hanging with us. We go till 3 on the game. Oh, time for our Firehouse Sub text of the hour at 803-404-6100. What do you got there, Tyler?
A nameless texter weighs in, going back to our conversation about Ole Miss coming into this weekend. Says, what happens if South Carolina punches him in the mouth early after hearing all the offseason that they are a playoff caliber team?
Could happen. I mean, look, you have this team coming in, and yes, you've heard about Ole Miss being a playoff caliber team, preseason top 10, looked at as on paper maybe the best Ole Miss team in forever.
And rightfully so.
I mean,
there's a reason why everybody's said the same thing about him.
Up until last Saturday, the thought was, well, Ole Miss is explosive on offense like always, and now they actually have dudes on defense. Again, Pro Football Focus had them rated the number 1 pass rush in the nation. South Carolina was number 2. Ole Miss was playing no one. They played some, preschools, a few kindergartens, but they were doing what you do to no one.
Exactly.
They're boat racing everybody. They ran into a real team-ish last Saturday, and they took them lightly. That team came in and got physical with them, and we saw what happened. I was going to steal Clark's mouse for his cool iMouse.
Chris forgets at least one thing a week in the studio, it seems like.
He'll come blazing in, grab something, go blaze it out. Happens all the time. Oh, anyway. So, yeah, I mean, could South Carolina just, kind of take the Kentucky formula to just the basic idea of it, right? Because both teams are different.
Yeah.
But give the idea we got to get real physical with Ole Miss. But let's be real for a minute. We talk about opening the show. That's been the MO of Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. And they have been really good. Like we said, the last 3 years of Ole Miss football, if you look at that one-loss record, they're a good team. Mm-hmm. But when they lose, it's usually they get out physical, they get beat up, and they lose those games when teams can. It's like basketball. Ole Miss is a team that wants to play full court. They want to run, they want to press, they want to dunk, they want to look pretty, they want to pile stats, and they want to beat the crap out of you, right?
Yep.
Kentucky wanted to play slow half-court basketball, hold the ball. There was 28 seconds on the shot clock. The minute you got the ball and took it to the basket, they were gonna give you a clothesline.
Yeah.
They were gonna get real physical with you. It's styles.
Yeah, no. Ole Miss is like Tennessee basketball last year, past couple of years, where they just again want to run up and down the court on you. And South Carolina's football team is much like Coach Paris's basketball team's like, no, we're going to slow the game down. We're going to play it our way. We're going to limit possessions, those kind of things. We're going to drag you into the mud and bring you into a fist fight because that's how we win.
And that's not what the Rebels want. And that's what happened last week with Kentucky. And South Carolina's going to try to do it again this week in their style of doing it. And until Ole Miss shows you they can win one of those games, that's going to be the MO against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Drag you in the mud, punch you in the face. And then you look and go, what are you going to do about it? Until Ole Miss gets up and fights back truly, that's going to be the basic game plan template to play Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss teams. That's the way it's going to be. So, Texter, we'll see what happens on Saturday. And obviously, you want to start fast. Obviously, you want to punch them. But again, college football today, look, you got up 17-0 on LSU. You're up, 24-10 on LSU. And you still lose a close football game that you should have won. Teams like LSU or Ole Miss or Alabama, Georgia, getting up on them early means nothing. Georgia was down 30-7 in Tuscaloosa to a very talented Alabama team who took the lead with 2 minutes left.
Georgia. It was brief, but they took it.
It never stops. You can't breathe. There's no taking your foot off the gas. There's no, it's like a horror movie. You think you killed Freddy Krueger or Mike Myers or Jigsaw?
Yeah, the second you catch your breath, guess what? Here they come.
Here they come. This is what college football is, especially in the SEC, especially against these high-powered offenses and these talented football teams. Up 17-0 means nothing. It means zero. So even if you do punch them in the head early, you got to keep punching them. Once your one hand hurts, you got to punch them with the other hand. Once your hands hurt, you got to start kicking them. You never take for granted they're dead because they're not dead. They're never dead till the clock says zero.
Do you remember in the movie Zombieland, the double tap?
Yes.
Where it's like when you think you have them down, shoot them again just to make sure.
Right.
That's what you got to do here.
Exactly. Double tap. Just like Zombieland. I wonder if Shane's going to use that one in the pregame motivational moment.
Why not?
Why not?
Well,
it works.
Trying to think. The guys on the team, how old they have been when that came out. They may not even know what Zombieland is.
I know. That's true. Well, remember, Pete Limbo said they didn't know anything about anything that's not now.
Well, yeah, because these, which by the way, going back to Saturday, the fact that Ryan Williams was born in 2007 makes me uncomfortable.
Oh, it makes you jealous because it's just vile.
Because like when you're growing up, like college football players, like, oh, those are adults, those are grown men out there.
21 years old.
Then you get past their age, and you're like, those are kids.
Oh, I know.
Like
I know.
I remember what I was doing when this guy was born.
So yeah, you've hit it. Now I'm to the point where I'm watching those guys' kids play.
Oh yeah,
I'm there now.
yeah.
You watch someone. Oh wow, watch this old man play. Oh.
It's like, wait, Frank Gore Jr.,
No.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh, I know. That's when you start to go, God, I'm old. I am massively old. We appreciate the text at 803-404-6100. Football in the 1 o'clock hour coming up. The depth chart for South Carolina Ole Miss. We'll go over that a little bit.
Actually coming up, Shane Beamer's presser.
And Shane Beamer's presser in a couple minutes.
That's right.
After Shane is done, we'll go over the depth chart for
I know
South
we got to get
Carolina.
back in the cycle
I'm
of this
totally
week
out of this.
again.
1 week's totally wiped me out. Shane's presser's coming up. We'll go over the depth chart of South Carolina, Ole Miss, also the bowl projections. They're always fun because South Carolina's in them now.
Finally.
So we got to all that in the 1 o'clock hour. Plus, we'll react to Shane's presser, which is coming up in about 5 minutes here on the game in Columbia at 107.5. And we'll hear about what's the injury update. Lenore Sellers, Rocket Sanders. I think you're definitely seeing Sellers. I'm hoping you're seeing. You need Sanders on Saturday. No offense to the rest of the running backs. You need Sanders on Saturday. So we'll find out that from Shane. Any other nuggets of information we get from the ball coach. Elijah Campbell will come in as well in the 2 o'clock hour to give us his thoughts. He's covering the presser. All that coming up here on the halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head, till 3 here on the game in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Already, time to go. Shane Beamer, his weekly presser. Let's kick it, Tyler.
And the Ole Miss this Saturday is our first responders game, which is very fitting after all that's been going on across this region since last week with the hurricanes. So certainly, regardless of that, we'd be so grateful for all the first responders and all they do for us, our safety throughout this region, throughout this country. So thanks to them to begin with. And then especially with all they've been doing, and so many have been doing since last Thursday, Friday, over the weekend with the storm. So grateful for them. Thoughts and prayers and hearts go out to everyone that's been afflicted by this storm in South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, the upstate, Western North Carolina, East Tennessee. Just some of the video and footage that I've seen is devastating. I got friends in Asheville that reached out to over the weekend and hadn't heard from a lot of them, and just heard from one a few minutes ago for the first time, and it's just terrible. So thinking of them and praying for them as well, and would encourage everyone to do the same and help in any way they can as well, and then everyone here in this region as well. I know many here in Columbia are still without power. My family and I were without power till 9:30 last night. We lost it on Friday morning, I guess around 4 a.m., and didn't turn on until 9:30 or so last night as well. So thanks to the power companies and all that as well that have been working around the clock to get everyone's power back. And shout out to my man Fred Gant with Hay Hills Services. Appreciate him coming over to our house. We had 3 trees down in our driveway, and we couldn't get out of the driveway on Friday morning. And appreciate Fred and some of his guys coming over and with a chainsaw and cutting down trees, or not cutting down, but taking out trees so we could get out of our driveway, because 3 trees came down in our driveway. But compared to what a lot of people are going through, that's nothing, and certainly good to have power back as well. I think our team for the most part was okay. I walked in the team meeting on Sunday afternoon and asked how many of our guys didn't have power, because we as coaches wanted to help them, and Josh Simon was the only player, and I was the one coach outside of, I think, Mike Furry and Travian Robinson. So luckily those guys did okay and whatnot. But thinking of all those guys also for sure, and thanks to our first responders. The bye week was good. No question, we got better Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday out on the practice field. As you guys know, we gave them the weekend off to get away. I think it was good for our guys to be able to get away for a little bit. We went out recruiting. Some of us did, myself included, on Thursday, and then obviously the storm really messed things up from a recruiting standpoint, not being able to get out on Friday, which is okay. There's a lot more important things than being able to go recruiting because of the damage that storm inflicted. But got better during the bye week, and then got back in here and got back to work on Sunday afternoon and full speed ahead on Ole Miss. A really talented, as we all know, and very well coached team without a doubt. Defensively, a lot of really good players, a lot of new players all across the board from a personnel standpoint, but they have size in the secondary, athleticism at linebacker, really, really good up front on the defensive line. Lead the SEC in sacks, and they've got ends that can rush the passer, tackles that can take over games, so they're really good defensively. And then offensively, you look at statistics, they're pretty much number one in everything right now from an offensive standpoint. We've got to be able to do a great job handling their tempo, no question about it. Offensive line, big. Probably the biggest offensive line we'll play this season when you just look at height and weight. Veteran guys transferred from North Carolina, 2 transfers that started at Washington. So really good up front. Quarterback's extremely talented, very experienced. Really good group of running backs, and then a really good group of wide receivers as well. So big challenge, but that's life in the SEC every single week as well. We know Saturday at 3:30 will be awesome in our stadium as well, and can't wait to be back in there. We only got 3 games in the month of October, and this is the only home game in the month of October. So know it'll be rocking in there on Saturday, and we certainly absolutely need it to be, and looking forward to getting back in there. Injury-wise, we'll obviously put out a report tomorrow night, but we're in pretty good shape, and that's all I'll say about that. Questions?
Shane, it's been 4 games now. So with I think it's the Kelly Bryant rule where guys can redshirt or whatever, have you guys had any of that with this team?
We've had some conversations with some guys, not so much guys that are playing, but guys that aren't playing that really don't have a major role right now, just kind of how we want this season to go for them. No one that we've said, absolutely, you're going to redshirt. We've tell them, hey, whatever we have to do every single week to win that particular football game, we will. But there are some initial conversations we've had with some guys that still have a redshirt year that don't have a major role right now, and we'll take it week to week. But certainly some things, a possibility with some guys for sure.
And also, not really a question, but some word association. Juice Wells.
Good football player.
I'm going to try to pick your brain a little bit here. After, mistakes, I feel like sometimes something you say is like, that's on me, that's on the coaching. How do you address within yourself mistakes that you would say, hey, that is on me? How do you go about that when you're done addressing everyone else's mistakes?
Great question. Try and learn from them. There's try and learn from them and be better the next time, if that makes sense. Whether it be decisions that I've made in games, you try and learn from them. I'm still mad at myself that I punted at midfield against Clemson last year in the fourth quarter when we had 4th and 6 or 7. I'm still mad at myself in 2021 that we had the ball right before the half at Georgia, like on our 1-yard line. We tried to max protect and throw a deep shot and got tackled for a safety. There's some things in the LSU game that I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't do better. I'm still mad at myself in the Gator Bowl. Notre Dame faked a punt on us, and I saw it coming, and I recognized they were in a different formation and that something was up, and I saw it, and I thought we'd be okay defending it even if they did do something, and we didn't, and we gave up a fake punt. So those, to me, are mistakes that I made that still eat at me. And you just try and learn from them where, okay, we're in that situation again. How are we going to, handle it? And for me as the head coach, it's in-game decisions, but it's also, I think, looking at, practices, and I take notes on everything, and every single day I'm writing down notes. So it helps me now being in year 4 where I can look back at, this week in year 1, year 2, year 3, coming off a bye week, notes from last year that I liked, didn't like, things like that as well. So you're constantly just trying to learn, but also Coach Day always uses the term around here, course correct, where if we do make a mistake or we do something that gets us off course, we're able to correct ourselves and get back on course. So that's what I try and do. Hope that answers your question. Good question.
Shane, a couple quick ones. First, Lenoris, healthy, ready to go?
He was good today. He did everything in practice, for sure.
And second, about you and Lane Kiffin. It seems like you guys would have a lot in common, both growing up in football families, that kind of thing. What's your relationship with Lane?
Solid. I got a ton of respect for him. I wouldn't say that we, talk regularly. We've certainly crossed paths, whether he was at Tennessee as the head coach, and I was an assistant coach here at South Carolina when he was the head coach at Tennessee. And then when he was at Florida at FAU, we played them. Actually, my very first game as an assistant coach at Oklahoma, blocked a punt for a touchdown, so that was good. We played FAU as well, and so I crossed paths with him then, and then just being in meetings in the league. So had a lot of respect for his dad, and certainly there's a lot that we can relate to because we're both, sons of coaches, like you're saying. But I'll get an occasional text or phone call from him about something randomly, kind of like you would think with Lane Kiffin, where it'll come when you least expect it, where you just kind of laugh and shake your head. But ton of respect for him as a coach, in a football mind, and he's done, an amazing job at Ole Miss, winning 11 games last season, and then the team that he's put together right now, they're certainly fun to watch.
Hey, Shane, over the last few years, you guys have typically gone into October with multiple losses. You guys are off to a 3-1 start this year.
Thanks, Jack. Jeez, man.
I mean,
I got you.
But the point is, like, what do you feel like is different about this year compared to the other years, other than just, slow starts or whatever?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I'm just giving you a hard time. And it's something that we looked at, there's no question. And I think I mentioned it after the Kentucky game, where we knew that we needed to get off to a better start in 2024 against Power 4 teams, especially compared to 21, 22, and 23, where 21 we lost to Kentucky and Georgia to start the Power 4 schedule. 22 we lost to Georgia and Arkansas. 23 we lost to North Carolina and Georgia. So we haven't gotten off to good starts against SEC, ACC teams, and it's something that we looked at, really going back to our summer conditioning, looking at tweaking some things that we did in there in the weight room, certainly our schedule. I think one thing that we did this year was we got into our preseason schedule, our weekly game schedule. We basically did that the whole month of August, where in years past, I would move practice times around. I would move the days off around where, okay, we've got a 3:30 game. We're going to practice at 3:30 all this week. We play night games. We're going to practice a couple times at night this week. We're going to practice a couple times at noon, whereas this year we treated every week just like our in-season schedule, where during preseason camp back in August, every Monday was an off day, just like it is now. Every practice was in the morning, just like it is now. And then every Saturday was a scrimmage, and all we did was just change the scrimmage times based on when we were playing Old Dominion and LSU and Kentucky. And hopefully that helped us, and I think it allowed us to get into more of a routine. So I think the biggest thing is, one, we've played well. Two, we've got a veteran team that's done a nice job. And then three, I think just being on a in-season schedule, maybe a little bit quicker, I feel like, helped us, and hopefully we'll continue to that success.
Some offensive players were in here earlier talking about how they feel like they're starting to figure out what they're good at. Do you, between 4 games, a week of self-scout and a bye, now in week 6, do you feel like this offense is starting to whittle down what it's best at and what you can kind of attack better than other things?
Yeah, I think so. I think every week that's a process, and there's no question we're better at running the ball. There's no question that each week we have to be creative in how we run the ball. There's no question that we've got athletic quarterbacks, so continue to accentuate those positives. You see our receiving core, those guys continue to step up and make plays. So I think it's understanding our personnel even better, really realizing how we're going to win football games around here without a doubt. And then you mentioned the self-scout. That was critical last week after 4 games to really be able to step back and say, what tendencies do we have, whether it be personnel-wise, formation-wise, that we really need to attack and combat. So, yeah, I think every week you continue to get better, and that'll be the whole key for us, not just on offense, but defense and special teams, that we just continue to get better every single week.
After you watch a game like Kentucky, Ole Miss, do you think to yourself, there's a blueprint of how to beat this team? Or do you think, wow, Ole Miss is going to come out next week with a bunch of stuff we haven't seen on film? We can't rely on Kentucky.
No, I think it's, I don't want to say so much a blueprint or worried so much about how Ole Miss is going to, come out. I'm sure Ole Miss will learn from, those games are from that Kentucky game. I'm sure they walk out of there thinking that they, left a lot of plays out there and want to do things better. So certainly you think about what are their answers going to be to maybe things that gave them trouble against Kentucky. And I know Lane talked about it in his press conference yesterday. Kentucky's defense is structured a lot differently than we are. So you can't really look at it and say, okay, it's going to be the same, because we're just different in a lot of ways. And Kentucky did a fabulous job, and Ole Miss certainly had their opportunities. So when I watch a game like that, watch it as a fan but also as a coach, and you certainly think about, some things that Kentucky did, but that's every week. I mean, when you're watching a team that you're going to take ideas from or steal things from, whatever you want to call it. That's every week. But I walked out of that game thinking, you know what, we knew Kentucky was a good team when we played them. They showed that against Georgia the next week, and then they showed that against Ole Miss Saturday. And then I also walked out of there saying, I knew Ole Miss is a really good team, and they showed that on Saturday, and it was just a heck of an SEC football game. That's kind of how I look at it. And then when you get back in here on Sunday, then you really dive into the tape and, maybe things that you thought were happening on the TV copy, you really dive into it when you see the sideline and the end zone views and kind of see different things on both sides as well.
I'll blame this one on Pete since he asked about LaNorris. How was Rocket today?
Yeah, I said that's all I'm going to say about the injuries, and then Pete slipped one in, and now you're going. So I said I think we're in good shape, I think were the words I used. So LaNorris and Rocket were both out there. They both looked good. Were they 100%? I wouldn't say they were 100%, but they both told me they felt great and they look good, and they'll both be able to do even more tomorrow, I would think, as well. And before anybody asks it, Jared Brown was out there today too. So I'll go ahead and let somebody get an extra question in, but I'll answer in that one as well.
Hey, Coach. Obviously, in today's world of college football, it's not uncommon to play former teammates. But this one in particular, with Juice Wells coming to town, how do you as a coaching staff ensure that maybe those emotions don't boil over onto the field and potentially cost you guys field position, penalties, XYZ?
Yeah, I think that's every game. You want to make sure you play with great poise, and they've got a good football team, and I know we're going to get the best version of Ole Miss, and what we're focusing on is just getting the best version. They get the best version of South Carolina, and they got a lot of really good players on offense, and Juice is a good player, but when you sit there and watch number 9, the other receiver, they targeted him 15 times Saturday. So we better be, not caught up in one player. We better be aware of him, and then we know what a weapon the tight end is. And then 19, the slot receiver, Caden Lee, we recruited the heck out of him, and he had a lot of targets on Saturday when they threw the football. The running back had a lot of targets in the passing game. So for us, it'll just be they have a lot of really good players that we have to prepare for, and on all 3 phases. And it's always about, playing smart football and poise and doing our job, especially when you're in, chaotic environments like our stadium is going to be on Saturday.
Kind of along with that, like what level of play are you going to have to see from your secondary with all of those options that they have and with the tempo that they play as well? Are you going to see from the back end guys if you want to come out with a win? Yeah, no, they'll have to play well. We'll have to do a great job tackling, and that's a key for us this week is we've really got to tackle well. That's one thing I thought Kentucky did a great job of last week is making one-on-one tackles, and Ole Miss is going to get their yards. They're going to get their carries and catches. We just got to do a great job tackling, not just in the secondary, but all 11 guys on defense to make sure that those 5-yard gains don't turn into 30-yard gains, and for sure. But certainly the secondary, without a doubt, because they get to going fast, and then there's a miscommunication or somebody doesn't play the right technique, and you're giving up touchdown passes over your head, and that's what can't happen. And it's not just the secondary; it's the linebackers and everyone that have to do a great job from a coverage standpoint, but starting with tackling all 3 levels of the defense.
I literally just took Rocket all out of my story. So anyways, I feel like you said a couple weeks ago, it might have been the Akron game, just like the pattern of sort of making mistakes right before halftime. Was that addressed at all in the bye week, and sort of how do you address kind of like a weird timing pattern like that?
Mistakes before halftime, I'm sorry. I said that. 2-minute drives and things like that.
Just like when Sellers got sacked and in the LSU game and giving up the touchdown to Akron right before, like little kind of letting up right before halftime. I
did say that. That's one thing I've tried to forget, Lulu. I'm sorry. As well. No, it's we need to be better. There's no question about it. Specifically being better at the end of the first half. Have I addressed that specifically? No. Have I addressed we need to be better playing a full 60 minutes? Absolutely. Have I addressed not necessarily being better in our 2-minute offense, but we need to be better in our 2-minute offense? But how do I handle that? We just continue to rep the heck out of it, and we look like the dang I don't know who the best 2-minute offense is in the NFL, but we look really good in practice. You know, we do it literally every Sunday and every Thursday, and we've done a really good job of it offensively as well, and create a lot of situations where, okay, we need a field goal, we need a touchdown, we got 3 timeouts, we got no timeout, we got to go 90 yards, we got to go 20 yards, whatever it might be, creating as many situations as we can when we do it on Sundays and Thursdays. But I think for us, it's not so much when those plays happen, it's making sure we're playing with the right technique. The Akron game, we're in 3 deep coverage, and we just got to make a play on the ball. You know, the LSU game, we got to be better from a protection standpoint and get rid of the ball and whatnot as well. But something that we just continue to work and harp on and emphasize playing a full 60 minutes, because that's what it takes in these games, without a doubt.
Shane, obviously, you know, UNLV went through that situation with their quarterback and, you know, getting surprised there. How do you and coaches kind of approach the idea that to try and prevent that? I'm sure you've game planned that out as far as this NIL stuff goes. What are the best practices to try and prevent that?
I think for us, it's just constant communication. And even before last week, I mean, I tell our coaches all the time, make sure we're over communicating with guys on what their role is right now. So from a personnel standpoint, and goes back to David's question about redshirting and all that as well, but from a personnel standpoint, making sure that there's never gray area about why this particular guy is not playing maybe as much as he wants to. And having those conversations. And I tell our players all the time, if you have a question about your role right now, ask us and go to your position coach, come to me, and they do when they have those issues. So that's one thing, is just constantly being honest with them. But then in that particular instance, from an NIL standpoint, it's the same thing, being honest with them. We're not going to, there's a lot of people that overpromise and underdeliver. We're not going to overpromise around here. If anything, we're going to underpromise and overdeliver as well. And I believe we have from that standpoint. And, you know, and then thankful to our state and university that our NIL situations for all of our student athletes can be a little bit more black and white and structured starting this past summer. And that's been really good too, to be able to combat a lot of that also.
I've heard Lane Kiffin say in the past that when recruits come to campus, parents will often comment that they feel like they already know him because he's so active on Twitter. You are also a coach who's active on Twitter. Does that ever happen to you, where people, recruits, parents come to you and say, like, we feel like we know you, we feel like you're a human being because you're on Twitter and active?
A human being. I get a lot that we love following you on social media, or I probably get more than anything, Jordan, just like we love seeing the family interaction that you have, that, you know, your family after the game, or you saying something about your family on Twitter. I get that quite a bit as well. But I certainly, depends on the age of the people. With a lot of the recruits, it'll be like, man, I love that Soulja Boy video you did. But then with the parents, it'll be like, man, that Office parody spoof you guys did was amazing. You know, a little bit of an older generation. So I think we've been able to do something that hits everyone to a certain level, regardless of their age. But that's probably the biggest thing, is just some of the things we've done on social media, parents commenting on that. But then I've said it before to you guys, recruits families use the words real and genuine with us all the time, that you guys are very real, very genuine. And that's who we are. Like, what people say to me, like I do get this a lot, like, who runs your social media? Like, who's doing all that tweeting? I'm like, me. They're like, no, really, seriously, who does it? And I said, me. No one has ever sent, other than maybe Justin King probably sent the first tweet that I ever had as a Gamecock football coach. Ever since then, any tweet that's ever come from my account has been from me. And I got to think about some dumb ones I've probably sent out. I'm going to deny it if there were some dumb ones in the past. But I do it, and that's probably the biggest thing, is people think that I don't, but I am who I am, so I don't have anything to hide from that standpoint.
Hey, Shane, how many SEC games were you able to watch this weekend?
I think everyone that was on, I believe. So noon, I watched Kentucky Ole Miss, 3:30. I flipped back and forth between Auburn, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M, Arkansas. At night, I watched Tennessee, Alabama, or Georgia, Alabama. Georgia, Alabama. Flip back and forth one time for South Alabama and LSU, but it was a blowout. So then I was done with that game, and then I went right back to Georgia, Alabama, and I did not watch a play of Mississippi State, Texas. So that's one that I did not. Even though my wife's a State grad, we did not watch that game. We were glued into the other one and watched. I watched a little bit of everything. Watched a little bit of Southern Cal, Wisconsin, and North Carolina, Duke. Watched a little bit of that game. So it was really cool to be a fan for a day and just watch football.
So based on what you saw this weekend, what would you say is the theme of the SEC this season after the first month or so?
Oh, great question. I think really, really deep and really good. There's just a bunch of really good teams in this league. And yes, I know that the SEC, we've lost some marquee non-conference games to teams from, I'm trying to get my conferences straight, from the Big Ten or the ACC. But if you just look at, what we've done, some of the other leagues that have been upset or lost some games to some non-Power 4 teams compared to the SEC, and then just the level of really good players. That's probably the biggest thing that jumped out is when you watch SEC games all weekend, you watch these teams and you're like, my God, there's some really talented players in this league. And there's a reason that the SEC's led the NFL or led the country in draft picks, I think close to 20 straight years, because there's some really, really, really talented football players. And that's just life in this league, Rick. I don't come into the office on Sunday and get ready for an SEC game and turn on the tape and be like, all right, these guys will be a little bit of a breather this week because they're not very talented. Everybody's good and everybody's got NFL players, and that just, it was reaffirmed over the weekend watching so many games.
You didn't watch the Clemson game?
I did watch a little bit of that one.
I know they're not in the SEC yet. So.
No, I did. That was I'm still mesmerized by the fact that Stanford's in the ACC and that was a conference game. That one kind of threw me, but I did watch a little bit of that one. I watched a little bit in the first quarter, I think. Klubnik took a hit and threw a touchdown pass to somebody in the end zone. I saw that play happen live, and then I'm like, all right, well, that one's over. And then I flipped back to whoever else, Georgia, I guess, is what I was watching.
And obviously, Kentucky beats Ole Miss, and I was asking players how much they read into that. Do you even need to address that with your team? Like, hey, I know we beat this team and they just beat the team we're about to play, or do you even not have to go down that road at all?
I don't think I need to with them, but I did because I'm sure people are saying that, hey, you guys beat Kentucky. Kentucky beat Ole Miss, so you're just automatically supposed to beat Ole Miss, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, we played really well against Kentucky that day. It was a dogfight last Saturday over in Oxford between those two guys, and there's the expectations externally of what people think are supposed to happen, but then there's also making sure that our players, and we talked about that this morning in our team meeting, Hale, was making sure that we have a great respect for how hard winning football games is, how hard it is, and make sure we have a great respect for the process that it takes throughout the week in order to play well on Saturday, and then realizing that no matter what has happened up to this point, all that matters is Saturday, and that we have to play really well in order to win this football game, because this is a really, really, really talented team coming in here. There's no question about it.
Shane, on that note, with these talented SEC players and you guys, beating Kentucky, then beating Ole Miss, kind of the cycle there, do you think that's just how the SEC has always been, or is there more parity now in this age of NIL and the transfer portal, stuff like that?
No, I think there's more parity. I think certainly you can change your roster around pretty quickly. Rocket certainly has helped our running game, and Spencer came in and helped our offense in the 2 years he was here. But if you look at Ole Miss, Lane said it after last season. They lost to Georgia, Alabama, and he said that we needed to get better on the line of scrimmage. That's the difference between Ole Miss and some of those other teams. So what'd they do? They went out and got Princely, the defensive end from Florida, who it seems like he's been in the SEC forever. I can remember going into his high school because his high school in Texas was my recruiting area when I was at Oklahoma. So I'm coaching at Oklahoma, and we were trying to recruit Princely to Oklahoma. And then he goes to Florida, and he's a heck of an edge rusher. Now he's at Ole Miss. Last year when, Nolan at Texas A&M is a dude, and now he's no longer at Texas A&M. He's now at Ole Miss. And then you see the fact that, they've brought in 2 offensive linemen that were at Washington and had a great year at Washington. So they've changed their roster around quickly at Ole Miss, particularly on the line of scrimmage, where you don't look at them and say, well, they're going to struggle against the top teams in the league. Ole Miss is a team that, in my mind, can beat anybody in this league. And then, Georgia is the defending or preseason pick, I guess, to win the league. And you saw what Kentucky did with them and how close that game was. So I certainly think in today's time, there is more parity, and there's a lot of really, really good football teams in this league. And every single Saturday, you have to play really, really well in order to give yourself a chance to be successful. Nothing, John? Wow. All right, man. I like that. Just making sure you were okay. Jared, good one. All right, he's great.
That it, I guess. Yeah, Shane is done. Finished up his weekly presser. We didn't get a chance to get to this, Tyler, because Shane jumped in there quick. But guess what? Here's Shane Beamer's weekly presser.
Now, let's hear from the coach. Shane Beamer's press conference, sponsored by Crescent Construction, the official roofer of the Gamecocks.
All right, we heard Shane talking to the media about a half hour like usual, just now here on 107.5 The Game in Columbia. And, again, no wow moment there, Tyler, at all with Shane. We're going to talk about it coming back, though. Our thoughts on the injury updates, anything else Shane said about Ole Miss or the SEC or NIL. We'll get to our thoughts on Shane Beamer, the weekly presser that just concluded. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head hanging with you here on The Game. What we're talking about is Shane Beamer, just rolling off his weekly presser just a few minutes ago here on the game here in Columbia. Terry Ford, Tyler Head, halftime show. All right, so, I mean, obviously we didn't get, like, any, wow, breaking news moments from Shane, but I thought it was really interesting about with Princely. I was recruiting him when I was in Oklahoma. But that's today's world, right?
It is.
And you see this transfer portal to go with the COVID year, and I mean, dudes, you're 24 years old. You got the tight end at Miami who's 35.
At least.
So it is funny though. It's and again that when the COVID thing burns itself off, then we'll get back to a little bit more of some kind of sanity with ages, but still. You know, you look at guys. I mean, some guys have had multiple redshirt years because of injuries, things of that nature. Now with the unlimited transfer portal too, you don't have to sit out a year. You don't have to fake like you need to transfer because your aunt's, uncle's, next door neighbor's niece's dog needs you or whatever. So we'll probably bring the age back a little bit, Tyler, here to 22, maybe 23 at the oldest.
Yeah, the extra COVID year is what's extended it for a lot of guys, and I feel like because Princely, his freshman year was 2020. So he's in that last crop of guys that would still be eligible for that. So I think we'll revert back to the norm. Like, yeah, you have the redshirt rule where guys can play maybe 4 games as a freshman and still hang around for 5 years. So that'll be kind of the extent. But, yeah, we're kind of filtering out those guys that are these super, super seniors.
Yeah, and, Shane obviously talking about feels like everybody's a go on Saturday.
He did say they're not all 100%, which I think is significant.
That's the door. That's the door.
Exactly,
right?
Which isn't surprising, especially when you talk about like ankle injuries. Like if you've ever sprained your ankle or twisted your ankle really bad, it doesn't just magically go away after a week or so. Like you're going to have some lingering effects, but they're practicing, which is a positive.
Yeah, if you heard that like Rocket wasn't practicing or he's limited or whatever, then you go, ooh.
That's concerning.
But all that stuff, as you remember, Shane had said this in past weeks, if you're not practicing by Tuesday. Remember we had this conversation with Lenore Sellers.
Yes.
Going into the Akron game. If you got guys, and again, not everything is always set in stone, but if a guy's not practicing by Tuesday, that might not be a good sign, especially coming off a bye, right? So hopefully we'll see, because look, no offense to anybody else who plays running back at South Carolina. There are guys there with skills and abilities and upside and potential and all that stuff. But right, if you feel a lot better about possibly beating Ole Miss if you have Rocket Sanders in the backfield.
Yeah, he's a difference maker, and you finally saw him emerge and be the Rocket Sanders that we hoped he was going to be against LSU. And who knows what he would have done if he was healthy for the entire game against Akron. Probably would have ran for a nice chunk of yards, and they pulled him out and let everybody else play. But we finally started to see him emerge, and you hope this ankle is not a setback on that because he adds so much to your offense when he is out there playing at 100%.
Especially because your passing game is still a work in progress, and when you have that threat, look, the most, and I'm not saying this because I charted it, but if you look over the people who chart these type of things, the most effective pass in football is play action. Whether you're running the ball well or not, the most effective pass in football is play action because the minute you fake a handoff, everybody comes forward. It's just automatic. Linebackers, safeties, everybody takes that step forward. But it's even more effective if you really have a running game.
Right.
So if you got Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers taking off and pulling up chunks in the run game, then your play action is even more effective than the normal efficiency of a play action pass. So it makes everything better if you got Rocket Sanders in the backfield. So hopefully Rocket will be 100% ready to rock and roll on Saturday afternoon at Williams-Brice and Lenore Sellers. It just feels like, yeah, you sat him out of the Akron game because, well, it's Akron. You got a bye week. You can get him healthy for this gauntlet you have coming up of Ole Miss and Bama, Oklahoma, A&M, blah, blah, blah. So that's, and Shane said it right away. Oh, he's practicing. I mean, Linares is going to start on Saturday.
And it sounds like he was in okay enough shape. If they really needed to play him against Akron, they could have, but you didn't need to. You felt fine with what Robbie Ashford was going to do, and obviously went out there and had a great game and allowed Sellers a couple extra days worth of rest. So I don't think there was a lot of concern about him going into the bye, but Rocket Sanders getting hurt in-game and limping off the field was definitely something that sounded the alarm bells, but it sounds like it's on track for this weekend.
All right, we will check the South Carolina depth chart. It's out. We'll take a spin through the depth chart for Ole Miss. And it's not a whole lot different than the depth charts have been, but we'll go through it. Coming up next here at Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Again, we're busy. It's football season. Thursday, goal line framing in West Columbia. Tyler and Wes and Chris, Gamecock Central takeover of goal line framing. Again, that will go from 9 to noon on Thursday. Friday, it's our Friday tailgate show at Columbia Craft, Green Street in the Vista, getting you ready for South Carolina and Ole Miss on Saturday. And speaking of, we'll be at the party lot, Sound and Images. Gamecocks Game Day, sponsored by LexMed Ortho at 10:30, our 2-hour pregame. Right there, as you're right there on the corner there, as you're walking around. We'll be out there doing our pregame show like always. All right, all that stuff is coming up Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right here on the Game in Columbia. We'll talk about the depth chart and a Firehouse sub text the hour. It's coming up at 803-404-6100 on the halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head on the Game. Oh, time for our Firehouse sub text of the hour at 803-404-6100. What do you got there, Tyler?
Yeah, I got Casey and Gilbert says, believe the duo of Kennard and Stewart needs to continue to take steps forward. If they can constantly keep pressure, and the rest of our defense will keep us in the game enough for our sorry, typo here. Enough for what will be a test for the coaching staff to figure out how to beat the Ole Miss defense. Going to be a big statement for Shane if our defense steps up and the offense can't win. But if they do, I believe the sky's the limit for the Gamecocks.
I mean, the one thing is when you are playing upper level on one side of the ball, you always have more hope, right? I mean, this defense, especially after what you saw last week, that Ole Miss can be slowed down if your defense is playing well. And look, Jackson Dart, up until last Saturday, if you looked at his numbers, if you break down the different quadrants in the passing game, and forget left, center, right for a minute, just go line of scrimmage, 0 to 9 yards, 10 to 19 yards, 20 yards plus. Jackson Dart from 10 to 20 plus, ridiculous. Up until last week. I think it was 1 for 7 in deep shots down the field versus Kentucky, I believe. And part of that was Kentucky got more heat. I think there was 15 pressures on Jackson Dart. Dart was sacked 4 times. So, again, if you're a Gamecock fan, you're going, oh, Kentucky's pass rush can get to him. South Carolina's pass rush should be able to get to him. So you're saying, okay, so if you can muddy this thing up, chase Jackson Dart, get heat on him, totally take away the rhythm of that passing game, put enough pressure where you can't get those deep throws in rhythm to receivers that are busting open, whatever the case, that helps you. I again go back to if you're Ole Miss, again, the little chink in the armor you've seen with South Carolina's really good defense has been at times you can run on them. So are you going to try to run using Parrish and that stable of running backs? Parrish is still averaging 7 yards a carry on the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even after last week.
Yep.
I think he averaged, a tick under 5 last week, I believe it was, in the Kentucky game. Dude's still averaging 7 yards a carry. Again, it's against a bunch of flag football teams, but just the staggering numbers that Ole Miss brings to the table that they have piled up. Harris has 49 catches.
Yeah, and he's averaging over $150 a game. He went for 176 last week, so there was no drop off with the level of competition stepping up.
Harris, they hit Harris with a pass in intermediate zone, and he zinged that baby with some yak yards. I mean, Harris is what Juice Wells was hoping he would be when he went to Ole Miss.
But I think last Saturday proved Harris can get his, he can still win the game.
No, sure.
So just because he goes out there and has a monster performance doesn't mean you're going to lose.
No, that's okay. You just got to stop the other guys from eating.
Yes, which Kentucky did a great job locking down Juice. Only got 2 balls thrown his way, and, they were on him like white on rice.
And Juice isn't even their second leading receiver. Right now, Harris has more catches than the number 2 and 3 receivers combined.
Yep.
So, again, Harris is the guy to stop in the passing game. You don't want to be putting so much attention on Harris that the other guys start beating you, but Harris can get his. And like you said, you can still win the game. So, again, to me, it's, Ole Miss can be explosive throwing the ball down the field, and they can get big plays. But the concern is do not let them start running the football on you. Because, Lane will keep calling running plays all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, if Harris has if Harris has a game that we expect him to have, and Parrish runs for $120, and you're maybe in trouble then.
That changes the dynamic, yes. All right, real quick depth chart, and thank you for the text like always, 803-404-6100, Firehouse Subtext the hour, we appreciate it. Nothing stunning here if you look through the depth chart. Lenore Sellers, Rocket Sanders, wide receivers, Jared Brown, Gage Larvidan, and Mazeo Bennett. We've talked about this. If healthy, that's the way this thing would roll out, with Dre Jacobs and also Nick Harbor and Delvion Campbell as well. Offensive line, nothing has changed. Same 5 guys we've been seeing all year, with Marquis Anderson and Tree and Trovon Baugh as the backups across the line. Same thing at tight end with Josh Simon, Brady Hunt. Edge, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart. Defensive line, Tonka, Alex Huntley. You'll see the rotation also with Sanders, Jules, Goodwine, Barrett. Linebackers, Sam Olstuff, Bam Martin-Scott, Debo Williams, Demetrius Knight, Bengali Kamara. Defensive backfield hasn't changed either with Kilgore, Fortune, Eamon Worry, Smith, Collier. You'll see if Vakari Swain gets snaps as well. If Emery Floyd's healthy or David Spalding, they'll get some snaps too. So nothing really different there at all, Tyler, in the old depth chart for South Carolina. And the bowl projections, bud. It's good to see South Carolina in the bowl projections. CBS Sports, they have the Gamecocks facing off against Appalachian State in the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa. Tampa's a cool place to hang out.
Take a New Year's trip to Tampa.
Tampa's okay. ESPN, they have South Carolina matching up. Let's see. Schleybaugh has South Carolina matching up against Washington State in the Vegas Bowl.
That can be fun.
I am picturing Gamecocks Game Day, sponsored by LexMed Ortho, live from the Bellagio on the Strip in Vegas with Terry Ford and Tyler Head.
Think Cumulus will let us do that?
I'm picturing this fantasy scenario live at the Bellagio. Let's see. Also, ESPN has the projection of South Carolina playing Oklahoma State in the Liberty Bowl in Memphis. USA Today, Eric Smith has South Carolina also in the Vegas Bowl against Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. Hey, all that sounds good, man. All sounds good. I like that trip to Vegas.
You know, that's a bowl game that I probably value over all the other ones.
For some reason, I like that idea more than the others.
You know,
No
hey,
offense.
Listen, the Citrus Bowl has a long history. That'd be neat. Going back to the Gator Bowl a couple years ago, that was cool. But I think Vegas would be a pretty fun time.
Vegas would be a lot of fun.
I feel like a lot of fans would enjoy that trip.
I think a lot of people on this show right now would enjoy that trip.
Let's cross our fingers and make it happen. A lot of football to be played between now and then.
Absolutely. You know what's funny? I think I've told you this before. When I was younger, I wanted to go to Vegas, but I wouldn't because the young version of me would never come back.
Yeah. Well, now you might have to.
But I would come back. See, now that I'm just old and out of my prime, I'll be asleep at 11:30 in Vegas anyway. So, okay, maybe I make it to midnight. All right, thank you for the text. Like always, 803-446-6100. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. We are complete with that, and we're coming back. What's Trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions on the halftime show on the game. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head, hanging out. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. What's trending at 2, Tyler? Shane Beamer's presser. The man who infiltrated Shane Beamer's presser. Grabbed all the secrets, all the game plans, all the files. Took video of unauthorized areas.
Well, people can't see it on live stream, but he has a notebook that's about 3 feet high of the exact game plan for this weekend of how they're going to beat Ole Miss.
And now it will be read on the air by Elijah Campbell, who's here. Hey, bud.
Hey. Yeah, I repelled from the ceiling. It's like, you remember that This Is Sports Center commercial where Alex Ovechkin is in like the copy room or whatever, and Steve Levy walks in. He's like, what are you, some kind of Russian spy? And he's like, no. What are you talking about? And then Steve Levy leaves, and then I forget who the goalie was for the Caps at the time. Also, a Russian national opens up, the tile from the ceiling, says, wow, that was close. And Ovechkin goes, too close. And he says it in Russian. They repel him back up. That was me.
That was you?
Yeah, that was me.
Or the one with Albert Pujols as the machine. And he's taking pictures of everything through his cyborg eye or whatever.
A combination of all of that.
All right, so, we obviously the thing we're focusing on first and foremost is injuries. And Sellers is playing. That one
feels like it.
Feels like he's playing. Rocket Sanders, we didn't hear he's limited. We didn't hear anything like that. We heard everybody's practicing. So everything's heading in the right direction. We'll see on Saturday because, again, we'll see the injury reports that we're going to get as I laugh about those, but it's something. It's better than what you used to get.
The availability report. Don't you dare call it an injury report.
We can't call it an injury report.
The SEC would be very mad if you refer to anything as closely resembling the NFL.
It's like, hey, it's not a 2-minute warning.
Don't you dare call it a warning. This is a timeout, brother. This is a timeout. Don't you dare call it a warning.
It feels like we're trending towards seeing Sanders and Sellers on Saturday against Ole Miss.
I think so. That's the thing. If you're trying to parse through words and read between the lines, he did say Lenoris is the one that he at least elaborated a little bit on, and he said Lenoris looked good today. And maybe he thought Lenoris just had a sparkle in his eye, and maybe he thought he looked really good, physically. It's like, wow.
Or maybe
Lenoris,
he was wearing a shirt that made his eyes pop.
You know what? Yeah, he got a haircut over the weekend, just looking real fresh.
Exactly.
Not wearing the glasses anymore, the contacts. Good-looking guy, right?
Maybe he was just talking about his physical appearance, and that wouldn't, if that's what he meant, then he wouldn't technically be lying. He said, I thought he looked good, and I think Tyler looks good today. I love the hat.
Yeah, I do too. Makes his eyes pop.
It does.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I'm ready to go for Saturday.
So Tyler's ready to go for Saturday.
You look good for Saturday.
It's never been more available for Saturday.
Now my physical presence on the field, questionable.
But you look good. That's what matters. The other thing about this with Ole Miss, and we've talked about it here. Look, it feels like, you had a bunch of players, and you got all this talent. But your same MO that you've had under Lane Kiffin is go out, be physical with Ole Miss, punch them, throw them around, and they'll limp off to the sideline and whine and cry because they don't want a physical fight. They want to run down the field on you and get yards and points. They don't want to brawl.
Mm-hmm.
That because Kentucky brawled with them last week. But that being said,
Iowa them.
Yes, Kentucky is not Georgia, is not Alabama talent-wise, but Georgia used the same game plan that has been out there for the Kiffin era with Ole Miss. They're really talented still. Nothing changed last week that makes you think, wow, they're not as good as we. No. There's a ton of talent there. But once again, we saw a style of play that makes them uncomfortable, like that wedgie you get when you're walking around. How much do you buy in? Same old game plan, smack them around, beat them up, drag them into the mosh pit. Or do you think, okay, look, that was a one-off. They're still really talented. Let's not make too much of it because they got guys on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think the more I watch it, the more I realize you can't completely try to copy what Kentucky did and it work again. Because if you think about it, Kentucky was very fortunate to come out with the win in terms of getting help from the football gods. Look, not many times does a team get outgained on a per-play basis by almost 2 whole yards per play and win. Very, very rarely do you lose the yards per play battle, regardless of deficit and margin, and still win the football game, let alone when that deficit's not, like 5.4 yards per play to 5.3.
Mm-hmm.
But it was 6.3 to 4.5. That's steep. That adds up. Ole Miss still, for the most part, did a lot of what they wanted to do, but what killed them was a fumble in the red zone, 3 stupid penalties that were penalties. There were 3 penalties on that final drive that extended the Kentucky drive, all on 3rd down. And then it took Gavin Wimsatt trying to carry the ball into the end zone, getting popped on a great defensive play. That ball just falling right into the hands of Josh Caddis, who falls into the end zone, and they get the game-winning score. Kentucky didn't even really run the ball well at all. If you take away sack-adjusted rushing yards per attempt, they were still only at 3.3. That's well below the NCAA Division I average. So you got to be able to run the ball on Ole Miss. If you want to try to recreate some type of smother this team to death by controlling the clock or whatever it is, you got to be able to at least run the ball. I think if South Carolina only has 3.3 yards per attempt and sack-adjusted rushing, you're going to lose the game.
Well, especially a team that throws the ball as much and runs the ball as much as South Carolina.
Yes, and that relies on that run game as much as South Carolina does. Like, you got to be able to pick up more of that, you know.
The other thing, I mean, don't get me wrong, watching when South Carolina played Kentucky, this is the weirdest thing about college football in 2024. When South Carolina played Kentucky and the folks here in the Midlands watched that game, and all you did was watch the back of Brock Vandergrift's jersey as he ran helpless away from the South Carolina pass rush, right?
Terrified, yeah.
The man was Sam Darnold against New England. I'm seeing ghosts. I'm seeing Dylan Stewart everywhere. Then you watch Vandergrift actually have an effective game against Ole Miss. And Dane Key pop for over 100 yards. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, wait. These are the dudes that couldn't even complete a forward pass because their quarterback was laying in a pile of bones on the field. And they're throwing against Ole Miss. But that's really, I mean, look, South Carolina's gotten better throwing the football as the weeks have gone on, but it's still not the top thing on the game plan. So some of the things Kentucky did on both sides of the ball, you really can't just take a blueprint of it and copy it on the copier and say, okay, South Carolina, here's what you do. Because South Carolina wants to run the ball. South Carolina probably not going to throw it as efficiently as Kentucky did against Ole Miss. South Carolina has given up some yards in the run game, which Kentucky really did not do against Ole Miss. So, again, it's not as simple as, okay, like you said, just follow the Kentucky model.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences, too. And the thing with Kentucky's passing game is, like, Brock Vandagriff had arguably his best game as a college football player, not just because you go on the road and get the program's highest ranked road win since 1977. That's one thing. But he made a lot of throws under duress. Lenoris, Robbie, Davis Bevel, whoever is playing quarterback in this game is going to have to make some throws under duress. I think your offensive line, the offensive line at South Carolina is very similar to Kentucky's in terms of its pass protection. I think South Carolina might even be better in terms of pass protection than Kentucky's because they've struggled a lot. But even then, Ole Miss got pressure on Vandagriff, but Vandagriff handled that pressure fantastically. The one deep ball to Berrien Brown that was on 4th and long with the game on the line, that was made with pressure. And he put it right on the money. And it wasn't like Berrien Brown had like 5 yards of separation. He had just enough to be able to make the catch. So this is a game where if you want to look at ways to beat Ole Miss, I mean, Lenoris or Robbie, whoever it is going to have to be able to understand where the pressure is coming from. And I think it's one thing maybe this offensive line has struggled with at some points this year is picking up blitzes and quarterback having a hard time understanding where it's coming from. If the offensive line doesn't know where it's coming from, you're going to be surprised on where it comes from too. So understand where those blitzes are coming from, where the pressure is going to be, and having to make throws under duress. Now, to Lenoris' credit, up until the point where he got injured in the LSU game, he was a lot better at that from, snap one against Old Dominion to the second or first half of the LSU game. He's got to be able to step in there, make some big boy throws, and his receivers are going to have to help him out. And in some cases, maybe bail him out, make a play. Dane Key bailed out Brock Vandagriff when they needed a play on a couple of those catches. A couple of those catches Dane Key made were contested catches. Like those, sometimes the difference in Kentucky winning and losing was those skill position players making a play when they really had to. You're going to have to rely heavily on that, and you're going to have to still, as good as your defense is, you're still going to have to score about 20 to 28 points to end up winning this game. Where do you get those? I think that's kind of one of the bigger questions that we have, too, when breaking this game down.
Elijah Campbell hanging out with us, just coming over from the Shane Beamer presser at 1 o'clock here on the halftime show on the game. The other thing, and you bring up receivers making plays, South Carolina for the first time will have it feels like a healthy stable of wide receivers.
Yes.
Brown, Larvidan, and Bennett will be your starters. You'll have Campbell and Harbor and Jacobs next man up as the twos. South Carolina will finally have that whole crew. Look, again, say it with me. We know it was Akron, but old Gage made a couple of plays down the field.
One jump ball.
Yeah, it was really
a very
nice.
contested catch.
Excellent play. You'll get Brown back, who's been the leading receiver. Mazio Bennett, 5 catches on 5 targets. Again, I know, say it with me, it was Akron, but still, you'll be healthy in the wide receiver room with the top 6 guys you were hoping to count on. You finally get a chance to count on them.
And those guys are going to have to make plays. You're going to need every bit of how Mazio Bennett has progressed from week 1 to now to making that play in the Akron game where he gives a nice move at the top of the route, gets a clean release, and is right in between 2 safeties where Robbie was able to thread that needle and score that touchdown. You're going to need him to be a crisp route runner because while Ole Miss, and here's the thing with Ole Miss too, most of the penalties that they had 8 penalties on Saturday. Most of those came from the defensive backs. They have very eager defensive backs who play very physical, and that's how they get called for a lot of DPI. You're going to have to play physical. They're going to try to hit you at the top of the route. They're going to try to bump and run you the entire time. You got to be able to make plays through contact. And if you're looking at plays to the Akron game where you can say, yes, it's Akron, but that Gage Larvidan pass catch where Robbie Ashford had to escape some pressure, got hit as he threw, and it was a jump ball, basically a 1v1 in the air, and Gage Larvidan won that play, got the catch, and that was a huge gain for South Carolina, end up setting up, I believe, a score later on. That's the type of play you're going to have to make against Ole Miss because the corners are really talented but really physical, and they want to try to force turnovers. They'll give up some yards through the air, but they really want to force turnovers. They want to get the ball to dunk in the basketball goal, whatever it is they do after turnovers.
Right.
They want that. They want that badly. So you're going to have to be able to fight through a lot of contact. And really, if you look at the secondaries that this team has played so far this year, this is probably the most, riskiest in terms of their ability or desire to force turnovers, and the most penalized and the most physical. You're going to have to fight through a lot of contact. And here's the thing, the nature of, officiating in football. They get it wrong a lot, and they don't call everything. Defensive pass interference sometimes is kind of like holding, where you can call it on a lot of different plays. And Ole Miss might have to do the thing where if you're throwing the ball downfield, they'll try to grab and tug and do a lot of the things that might get be unseen. You're going to have to fight through a lot of contact. That stuff's not going to have to matter. You got to try to make the play anyway, just because that's the nature of this Ole Miss secondary.
Well, it's the Seattle Seahawk philosophy. They can't call it on every play.
Yep.
Keep grabbing them. Keep grabbing them and holding them because they're not going to throw a flag on every play. So the only thing about that is you keep doing it. At some point, they throw the flag the worst possible time.
Like they did against Kentucky, one of those DPIs that was called on that final game-winning drive for Kentucky. I believe it was Brandon Turnage had the arm of Berrien Brown, and basically it was kind of romantic. He held his hand for a good
cute.
chunk of the field. Yeah, I mean it was a lovely sentiment, but ultimately it goes from hand holding up to the arm, and then there's a little bit of a pull, and then it becomes pretty obvious what you're doing once that ball's in the air, and the flag was thrown. That extended the drive, and there was another DPI later, and then another hold in the end zone, and ultimately you might have gotten away with that for a good chunk of the game, but it really killed Ole Miss towards the end. And I think when you're watching the film as a South Carolina receiver, you're going into this with the understanding of they're going to do everything they can to make you uncomfortable. You have to fight through a lot of that contact.
And you hope that it's going to be one of those officiated games where they're throwing laundry on that stuff.
Or where they're very sensitive towards it. Yes.
Exactly. A couple of those early is advantage South Carolina. Nice job, my friend. Appreciate you. Elijah Campbell will be hanging out here with Jay Phillips on the postgame show from 3 to 6. Elijah, of course, again, over at Shane Beamer's Weekly Presser. All right, what's trending at 2? We got the Braves made the postseason. Woo! We'll get into that next. The baseball playoffs starting today with a lot of games. We got that coming up. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions, right here on the Halftime Show on the Game in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. Terry Ford Tyler Head halftime show on a game. We'll get back to more Shane Beamer presser from today, talking Gamecocks and Rebels again, 3:30 on Saturday, right here on the Game in Columbia and in Myrtle Beach. We get everything started here locally at 107.5 The Game with Gamecocks Game Day at 10:30. Sponsored by LexMed Ortho from the party lot at Sound and Images, right across from Williams-Brice on Bluff. All right, so today, the Braves survive.
Yeah,
you got a little. You have that, correct?
In fact, I do. I have Brandon Gaudin's a very good call of how things went down last night in game number 2.
Grounder to short. Arcee has got it. They did it! Despite all the adversity, all the twists and turns, the Braves battle their way back into the playoffs for a 7th straight season.
There you go, 88 win. By the way, when they won the World Series a few years ago, how many games they win?
I think it was
88?
right at 88. Yeah,
it was 88, man. So look. Do they look? They didn't look like a World Series champion a few years ago when they won 88. They don't look like one right now.
No.
And Chris Sale all of a sudden became Chris Sale.
10 minutes before a very important game number 2 is supposed to start, he gets scratched with back spasms, and I think a lot of people thought, okay, the sky is officially falling. But we talked about this yesterday, and it was such a weird scenario to have 2 teams playing where splitting it got both teams in the playoffs. And it's like, okay, well, if you win game 1, why do you try in game 2? You better start packing your bags because both teams had to hit the road regardless. So, yeah, the Braves, and shout out to Grant Holmes, who at the 11th hour was told, hey, by the way, you're pitching in the most important game of the season, and he goes out there and deals.
He did.
So shout out to him. But, yeah, the Mets had no reason to try in that game.
No,
I think
not at all.
If I was a Diamondbacks fan yesterday, I wouldn't have felt comfortable at all because there was no way either team was going to sweep.
No. And the Diamondbacks only have themselves to blame because they went, I think, 2-5 down the stretch.
Yeah, you had the chance to control your own destiny. You didn't do it. That's on you.
So sitting around hoping that the Mets are going to try in game 2. Nah, you know what? You caused your own problems.
You never want to be in a position where you're cheering for another team to help you.
Yeah. And the Mets did the smart thing. Didn't start pretty much anybody in game 2.
Yeah, no, they had the janitor, they had the ball boy, they had somebody's mom, you know.
The Mets mascot was out there batting cleanup. It was so again.
Half the team was already in Milwaukee by the end of that game.
Drunk.
Exactly.
From the celebration. All right, so the Braves will now take on the Padres. Starts tonight. Our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW, will carry it. I think 7:15. The pregame starts on the Braves Network. 8:30 first pitch. My favorite pitcher is going for Atlanta right now, and I haven't refreshed. Undecided.
Yeah, a lot of speculation on what they're going to do with that. Even rumors out there that Ian Anderson may be back on the bump. After spending most of the year in Gwinnett. But hey, anything's possible at this point in time. Again, Chris Sale, you thought was going to go last night. The back spasms, how long does that last? Could he be available for game number 2 tomorrow? I don't know. I'll say this. I don't have high expectations for tonight because you did just play 5 games in 4 days, and you just took a cross-country flight and are playing a game within 24 hours. This one probably not going to go the Braves' way tonight. Just a feeling.
And you're going up against Michael King, who had a really good year with the Padres.
Right.
But here's the thing really quick. Any of the 8 teams playing tonight can win the World Series.
Oh, you're in. You have a chance.
Yeah. Oh, you just got to get in the tournament. Last year, this started with 8 teams. 2 of those teams played for the championship.
Yeah.
And one won the World Series.
There's something about continuing to play. And we saw it last year with all the teams that got to sit for 5 days.
They were 1 and 3.
The diligence. They were 1 and 3. And I don't know what the rhyme or reason behind that is, but something about continuing to play after playing 162 games over the course of, 190, 200 days or something along those lines, it matters. And when you finally sit for 5 days and don't do the thing you've been doing nonstop for the past 7 months, it throws you off.
And that's what it is right there. You got into a rhythm of playing 6 days a week for 6 months. Then all of a sudden they say, hey, go sit down for 5 days.
And you're probably thinking, oh, that's great. That sounds good. But then you're like, I feel a little tight now.
The mojo has totally been flipped upside down. And we talk about this all the time. Baseball players, superstitious and very rhythm-oriented.
Oh, yes.
They have, every day they are the same way for 6 months. Now you take them away from it, and then you throw them back in it. So playing today and playing in these early series in some ways is good for you, which is so kooky.
Yeah.
I mean, Royals, Orioles, look, I love my Birds. They have, forget limping down the stretch. They were crawling down the stretch to the finish line. They had the third best record in the American League, but they were on pace for 104 wins, and they got 91 because a lot of injuries and a lot of scuffling. Would I be stunned if the Royals won the series? Not at all. Not at all.
No, but hey, getting to the postseason,
that's all that matters.
Is an accomplishment. And
2 straight years.
I'm not silver linings guy, but you look at all the injuries the Braves dealt with this year. Acuna, obviously, Fried, Strider, Austin Riley as of late. Ozzie Albies was gone for a lot of the year. To make it this far, even if you get bounced in 2 games by the Padres, you still made it.
Well, think about, too, besides Ozuna, everyone else's offensive numbers fell off the charts compared to last year.
Yeah.
All of them.
He was literally carrying the offense for a large portion of the season.
So, Braves, Padres. Padres have played really well since the All-Star break, by the way. They were smoking hot. Pitching's really good. Bullpen got better. The offense woke up. Padres are dangerous. We're saying all that, they could lose 2 straight to the Braves and go home.
That's baseball.
Brewers, every year they do it. Doesn't matter who the manager is, the GM. It doesn't matter. The players, the Brewers find a way to make the playoffs. They're in against the Mets. You just get the feeling the Mets will Met.
That game, I think, starting in about 5 minutes here.
Coming up. So Mets, Brewers. Feels like the Brewers are the better team, but who knows in the postseason. Tigers will go face the Astros, who have been in the playoffs for, 100 straight years, it feels like now?
Yeah, pretty much.
And you feel like, look, the Tigers, I think since 1st of August, they've been the best team in baseball. What they've done is crazy. And then, like I said, Royals and Orioles. This is so unpredictable now. I've even stopped predicting baseball playoffs.
By the way, what a year for the people in Detroit. If you're a Michigan fan and a Detroit sports fan.
I know.
National championship, Lions' first playoff win in God knows how long. Now, maybe Detroit or the Tigers go into the playoffs with a ton of momentum. Could be a magical year.
I was talking to our Michigan people upstairs, and they're creeped out. They're not used to this because, Detroit.
They're like, wait, they play baseball in October?
So I thought they were banned. I thought they were on probation. Let's grab a call real quick. 803-404-6100. Let's get our buddy Ray in here. Ray, thanks for holding on. You're on the halftime show, my friend. What's happening?
Hey, guys, I tell you, man, golly, yeah, I know we're in the middle of football season and everything, but, man, this is my favorite time of year. When you got college football, NFL football, and now we're getting ready to start playoff baseball. I mean, does it get any better than this?
Oh, it's fun. It's packed,
but, man,
Ray.
I tell you, but the Atlanta Braves, good land. When they lost Acuna and they lost all those other guys, I said, there's just no way. And the funny thing was they lost those guys, and then all of a sudden, right after All-Star break, they started winning. I said, okay, what's going on here? And then, man, they couldn't win a game. And I swear to God, it was in August that Jay Phillips, he made the comment, well, somehow the Braves will find a way. They'll find a way. I'm like, oh, Jay, not this year. You know how Jay is when he puts on his Braves glasses or his fish glasses. You just kind of let him go for about 10 minutes, you're like, all right, yeah. But anyway, man, he hit it. He nailed it there. But anyway, Terry, I was going to ask you, being a kid and growing up in Baltimore, I can remember back in the 70s, and my grandparents lived in Charlotte. And Charlotte was like the big city, at the time compared to Columbia. Well, they already had cable TV by the mid-'70s. So I'd go there. You had a Superstation. You had this channel out of Washington. And they would show a lot of the Orioles games.
Yep.
And, man, we got into the Orioles. I mean, if you had to go in a bar fight, could you think of a better player than Rick Dempsey?
Oh, God. Rick Dempsey's – he spent a lot of time in bars. So, yes, he would. Yeah. He'd be a good guy to have in a bar fight. Rick Dempsey's phenomenal. No, he was
great.
I
think about it, I know a lot of people think about Palmer and Cal Ripken, but, man, when I think about the Orioles, I think about guys like Rick Dempsey, Eddie Murray. You remember Al Bunbury?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Guys like that from the 70s, I mean. And then you throw a manager like Earl Weaver out there. I mean, he's worth the price of admission alone.
I tell you what, Ray, one day off the air, I'll tell you some Earl Weaver stories I can't repeat on the air. I appreciate you, man. We got to hit a break, Ray. Thank you. Yeah, Earl Weaver was something else. I'll just say it. All right, halftime show. Today is October 1st. Greatest day in the history of the world. Next, here on the halftime show on the Game. Men's Clinic of South Carolina is here to help you as you kind of get older and things aren't the way they used to be if you're a guy. Whether it's you don't sleep as well as you used to, that workout at the gym, you're not as strong, you don't recover from it as good as you used to. Your life drive, sex drive, personal drive, professional drive, it's just not driving. It's just not there. You don't remember things like you used to. You got to put in sticky notes everywhere. You got to have reminders to remind you about your reminders. Could just be low testosterone, man. That's all. One way to find out, 803-875-MENS. Call the Men's Clinic. Set up a free confidential consultation with Dr. Dan and the staff. Tell them your story. If they think it could be low T, they'll do some lab work. If it comes back low testosterone, then they'll put you on a program specialized for you to get you back to feeling you again. Make that call, 803-875-MENS, the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Get yourself feeling like you again. Oh, time for the greatest day in the history of the world, which is October 1st. halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head hanging here on the game. All right, so we got a good one for the old school.
Okay.
This day, October 1st, 1932, Tyler Head. This was the day in 1932 that Babe Ruth made his legendary call as he points to center field before hitting a home run into the Wrigley Field bleachers in the fifth inning of Game 3 of the World Series. This is very interesting on many fronts.
Okay.
We'll start with the story of Babe Ruth before the game promised a sick child, Johnny Sylvester, that he would hit a home run for him.
Right.
Now, Johnny Sylvester, the reason he was in the hospital, he was kicked in the head by a horse.
As often happened back then.
Because, you know, kids back then rode horses.
You're always told not to stand behind them.
Exactly. So Johnny got kicked in the head by a horse, was in the hospital. They didn't know if he was going to recover or not because getting kicked in the head by a horse in the 1930s might not end well for you.
Usually not.
So the story goes that Babe Ruth promised little Johnny that he would hit a home run for him. Then you get to the pointing it toward the bleachers by Babe Ruth. There are people that think he was calling the home run shot and people saying he was just pointing at the crowd who was heckling him like mercilessly.
Right.
What gets even better in this story, not only are they heckling him, now again, this is the 1930s when really much most of us weren't born. They were not only heckling Ruth, they were throwing vegetables and lemons at him, according to some accounts of this story. Now, in today's world, well, not so much today.
That is such a 1930s way of showing displeasure, throwing rotten tomatoes at someone.
20 years ago, you know, at Yankee Stadium or in Fenway, they were throwing batteries at you.
Yeah.
Like car batteries. No, they're throwing batteries. Back in the 30s, they would throw lettuce and fruit, tomatoes, lemons.
That Babe Ruth, I don't much care for that guy.
I'm going to throw some asparagus. Yeah, asparagus. So they would throw vegetables and fruit at you if they didn't like you back in the 30s.
It's like you're doing a talent show and getting booed off the stage.
It is so like 1930s or 40s.
And then one of the stooges comes by and slips on the tomato.
Right. Poke you in the eyes with those two fingers. So Ruth hits the home run. The Yankees win the game and the World Series against the Cubs. But that was our old school 1932.
Have we all done that at some point?
With throwing fruit?
No. Like playing Little League Baseball or at some point in your baseball or beer league softball career, you did the point?
Oh,
Because I think we've all done it at least once, right?
But did it work?
No.
No.
No. I hit 3 home runs in my baseball career, all inside the park, none of them pointing beforehand.
No, I did. There was no way I was pointing to get a base hit. Forget a home run. I was just hoping to get on base. I mean, the thing is, if you ever see the photographs of it looks like he is pointing toward, the bleachers.
Right.
So, yeah, you can say, yeah, he was pointing. And of course, Ruth is going to run with it because that's who Babe Ruth was. Whether he was pointing to call a home run for the little sick kid, Johnny Sylvester, or was he just pointing at the Wrigley Field bleachers saying, all you people are bleeping bleepers, and I hate you all. And by the way, I've got lettuce down my pants from all the stuff you're throwing at me. Whatever it was, Tyler, it will go down in history for that moment.
I almost like to think that maybe he was just like stretching really quick before the at-bat, but then it took on a life of its own, so he just ran with it. Like, oh, yeah, I was totally calling my shot.
Yeah, I mean, is he going to say no?
No.
No, of course. First of all, he's Babe Ruth. He's absolutely...
Yeah. And anything he did at that point was going to have lore behind it, right? Like, oh, legendary, beer and hot dogs, the point, all those kind of things. Like, people are going to run with it. So even if it was the most nonchalant thing that he gave no second thought to, if people want to make it into this historic moment, let him.
Well, you think about Babe Ruth in general. First of all, here's a guy who was one of the best pitchers in baseball with the Boston Red Sox. But he was so good offensively that they decided to take him for a long time, he had World Series records as a pitcher.
Yeah.
And they said, you know what? You kind of hit the ball a long way really far when you actually hit why don't we stop this pitcher nonsense and let you hit every day? And like we talked about, what was it, yesterday, I think it was 1927, dude hit more home runs by himself than teams did at that time. So he was bigger than life. Like, for real bigger than life, not just a big dude. Who, by the way, if you ever see how many career triples he had, man could run the bases for a big guy.
I think his 40 time was.
Oh, he probably went 23 miles an hour like Derrick Henry.
He was probably just as tough to tackle, too.
I mean, Ruth was looked at as this. I mean, again, he was like Shohei Ohtani is looked at a certain way right now for what he does that's just ridiculous. That was Ruth.
Yeah.
Babe Ruth was larger than life in this country. So to your point, anything Babe Ruth did was like, oh my God, he's Paul Bunyan or whatever back in those days. So he called a shot. He called a home run for a little sick kid. What a guy. Oh my gosh. And it might all just be.
Yeah. Yeah, they say he could read
BS.
the pitcher's mind and knew what pitch he was going to throw.
Absolutely.
Of course he could.
While eating a hot dog and drinking a beer.
Exactly. And taking a nap at home plate.
Exactly. Oh, he was hungover and hit 3 home runs in a game. I mean, all these Babe Ruth stories are craziness.
Yeah.
But he was probably the most well-known, popular guy in this country in the 20s and 30s.
That's right.
It's craziness. All right, so Babe Ruth, the greatest day in the history of the world. This day, 1932, the shot that was called by Ruth. All right, we only got time for a couple other ones here really quick. 2017, former NFL star O.J. Simpson released from Nevada's Lovelock prison after less than 9 years of detention of his 33-year sentence for armed robbery and kidnapping. So Juice got out of prison.
The juice was loose.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Remember when Deshaun Watson was good?
I do.
2017, on this day, Watson becomes the first rookie to throw 4 touchdown passes, run for another one since Fran Tarkenton in 1961, and tied an NFL record for most TDs by a rookie quarterback in Houston's 57-14 victory. We forget that Deshaun Watson at some point was actually really good at playing quarterback.
Came into the league red hot after a amazing college career.
Mm-hmm. All right, last one, 2011. An Arkansas quarterback threw for 510 yards on this day in 2011.
Ryan Mallett?
Tyler Wilson. Tyler Wilson. Not to say, I mean, Tyler Wilson was a good quarterback at Arkansas, but Arkansas has had some pretty decent quarterbacks in their lineage. At that point, Tyler Wilson, that was a school record, 510 yards. Jarius Wright, who played in the NFL, 13 grabs for a school record, 281 yards. Arkansas was down 18 at the half, came back and beat A&M 42-38.
Wow.
Tyler Wilson, over 500 yards.
Okay, let's see. Mallett was there the year before. Okay.
So, greatest day in the history of the world, October 1st. All right, we are busy Thursday. Goal line framing in West Columbia, Gamecock Central with Tyler and Wes and Chris will be taking over goal line framing again. You can, I'm sure Dreamy Josh will have tickets to something. You can go see Dreamy Josh and the crew. Again, goal line framing 9 to noon on Thursday. We'll wrap it up. There's a couple things we haven't gotten to that we'll try to get to. Jay Phillips will come in here and yip with us a little bit. We might even get to those with Jay. A couple of famous athlete deaths we've seen over the last, 24 hours.
Also, I think Jay might be pitching for the Braves tonight.
Well, you know what? At this point, why not? Give him the ball. He did throw a no-hitter and one-hitter in high school. Don't disrespect. All right, we'll talk to Jay. Our handoff sponsored by Little Pigs on Alpine Road. That is coming up. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head wrapping it up and handing it off to Jay and Elijah in the postgame show coming up at 3 here on the game. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head, our Firehouse sub text the hour coming up 803-404-6100. We'll have a lot of cuts from Shane. Presser was 1 o'clock today. Injury front.
Sounds promising.
Feels promising that we'll see, Lennar Sellers and Rocket and Jared Brown and all that crew. We're hoping. But it sounds promising. It's only Tuesday. Long way to go. But we'll find out. And more stuff from Shane throughout the afternoon here on the game. Jay Phillips is here. We got the TV set for baseball. Playoffs are rolling already. Houston, Detroit, first inning, no score. We got there on the Firehouse subtext of the hour line.
Well, first I have to ask, Jay, at any point did you strangle Elijah yesterday during the show? I know you threatened it a couple times.
He ruined the juju.
Let's put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
If the evening overall had gone poorly, I can't promise Elijah was going to show up to work today. I wouldn't have done it. I was just going to call some people.
So it was
that you knew.
So it was funny. I got home right as Albies helped the Braves take the lead. I immediately hopped on the live stream to hear Jay's reaction. And then when the Mets retook the lead, I got back on the live stream again to see what Jay's reaction was. And fantastic radio.
I'm going to tell you what. That thing, because I was monitoring also our sister station at the time. Well, and to hear what would happen there and then to hear Jay's reaction on our station was pretty interesting. You handled yourself with professionalism. Yeah, I'm just trying to be nice.
Jay also
that was
knows
sarcasm.
what the FCC fines are. So
I was very, very not happy.
Question: How wild were those last two innings? That was crazy.
Well, listen.
Crazy.
Now, see, you ask that, and I get that you and many others, you ask that in a neutral,
Absolutely.
like that was just good baseball drama kind of thing. It sucked. That's how it was. It was freaking terrible, man. I mean, the Braves had the lead in the 8th, then they retook it. They had it going into the 8th. They retook it in the 8th.
By the way,
I can't stand bleeping Lindor anyway.
Well, by the way,
and then he's trotting around like some. It was terrible, Terry. That's how it was. It was terrible.
When you hit the go-ahead home run, you're allowed to trot like that.
And next year when the Braves are playing the Mets in St. Lucie and March the 10th.
Hit him. We're going to hit him with a pitch.
Let me ask, how did you feel about the hugs and handshakes after the game with mutual congratulating between teams?
It was fake.
You think?
I actually didn't see that. I heard about it. I didn't say. Whatever.
No, they all got in a clubhouse together and sprayed champagne on each other. You know that, right?
I did see. Is it the first time in history that particular that had happened? I guess it has to be because for one thing,
it's bizarre.
We have an expanded playoff anyway.
Right.
So.
It was a weird.
It was very weird
deal.
Very weird.
Well,
So
look, they
made
it.
They're in.
Yeah, they're in.
And once you're in the tournament, we saw it last year.
That's all I asked. And I've seen some Braves fans that are like, we shouldn't be in. This is going to go bad. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
You'd rather miss the playoffs because you think you're not a strong team, and you're not the strongest team.
Brady, you won 88 a few years ago and won the World Series.
But you're in the playoffs,
You
man.
just got to be in the tournament, man.
And I think it's worth something, and Terry and I talked about this earlier, the injuries that you dealt with this season to still make it in, even as a wild card, that's worth something. That's
worth
7 straight playoff appearances.
Listen, I mean, Tyler, you and I are lifelong Braves fans, and Terry and I have discussed this before, but Braves fans, call us snobby or entitled or whatever. I don't feel like I'm entitled because, again, I was celebrating yesterday. I was happy.
As you should be, yeah.
But we have become accustomed to making the playoffs, and especially, I mean, what are you? You're like 30, right?
28.
28. I mean, I think in like 22 of the years you've been alive, the Braves have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll say this.
Something like that.
I'll say this, and both of you know this. Again, never take it for granted and never poo-poo it because this could be the last year for 20 years.
Think of where the Braves were 10 years ago compared to now. It's a night and day difference.
No, I never take it for granted, and I'm thrilled. I mean, that's why I still hold on to the anger of 1997 and 2012.
You always.
I want to punch umpires. One of them's dead, so I can't can't punch him.
I don't disagree with you about punching umpires. But the idea is, again, you never take it for granted because you never know when it's going to stop. And it could stop, and you might not see it again forever. The Pittsburgh Pirates were a great organization.
Yeah.
The Cincinnati Reds were the big red machine.
Yeah.
My Orioles for years and years and years were in the playoffs and then went through a drought like nobody's business. You look through baseball, the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah.
I mean, never take for granted being really good.
Help me out.
That's what I'm telling you.
I can still picture Andy Van Slyke sitting down in center field after the Sid Bream slide.
Mm-hmm.
Have the Pirates been back? Did they go?
They've been back. The Andrew McCutcheon teams made the playoffs.
They went like
but they did nothing.
But they didn't do anything.
No, they didn't.
You know, and I feel badly for those Pirates back then with Bonds and Bonilla and Van Slyke and all those guys because, they were really good.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
they all had to go away because, again, you didn't have the money because you're the Pirates.
You know.
All right, a couple of people passing, unfortunately, in the world of sports. Two guys who obviously were iconic to their sports, Pete Rose in baseball, Dikembe Mutombo in basketball. I didn't get into this too much because Pete Rose, it's such a thing. But again, he was a great baseball player, a phenomenal baseball player. The rest of it will pass along for another day. He was a great baseball player. And Dikembe Mutombo, one of the best defensive players in the history of the NBA, and a wonderful human being who did so many things that were so important away from the game. That alone should put him in a Hall of Fame. So,
Dikembe, I heard Dan Patrick talking about having conversations with David Stern and how David Stern just absolutely marveled when Dikembe had come to him one time, like, hey, I'm going to be doing this. And what I'd like is to have some support and networking. Like, I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm going to go back home and I'm going to do this. And like Commissioner Stern just marveling at the level of detail, concern, compassion, how much of his money he was going to put into it. And that he just you couldn't help but want to do it. And what an amazing basketball player. And those Georgetown teams, that program he was a part of, and then what he did, like you say, he just one of the I don't know enough. I mean, one of the 10 best defensive players to play the game.
I would say one of the 10 best defensive players, and one of the 5 best defensive bigs ever to play.
And just because he worked and he didn't care about. It's not to say he didn't care about the other end, but I'm not going to compare him to Rodman from a personality standpoint, but they worked so hard on the defensive end of the floor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Pete, we're going to talk about Pete next hour.
Look, I push it aside. Look, Pete Rose is a great baseball player, and Pete Rose is a great baseball player.
Yeah, all right.
And he was a great baseball player.
Yeah.
And by the way, he was a great baseball player. And I'm going to stop there today out of respect.
That's good.
For Pete Rose. All right, we're done.